And we're off and running. Happy Thanksgiving, a day early, but nevertheless, everyone's celebrating, and seems like the holiday mood has arrived, and we have too, for just another 4 hours of your entertainment. We say hello to you. Happy Wednesday. Great to be with you up here on the East Coast. Everybody seems to be in a festive mood, and I am guaranteeing that our audience will be no different. Let's get to some of the headlines that somehow you may have missed if you've been just working off a hangover. There's a new number one in the land with 2 weeks left in the football season. It is Ohio State. LSU and Ohio State playing musical chairs. Will it last? Does it matter? Oregon is gone. Alabama remains at 5. Can they stay there? They must win to do that and hopefully move up. The case for number one, again, this is a debate show conversation because both have significant games ahead. But if you're wondering, Ohio State has a pretty decent case, but LSU has those big top 25 wins against Alabama, Florida, Auburn. They used to have one against Texas, but that no longer counts. So we say hello to you. We'll talk a lot about that, the reaction from the college football playoff selection. That's been the theme all day. There are other stories making the rounds. Bo Bounds, we'll talk about the future of Joe Moorhead and Matt Luke. He'll join us in a couple of minutes. Then our favorite guest of all time. Really? Did I just say that? Bill Hancock, the executive director, the ED of the CFP. Sounds like I'm doing a pharmaceutical ad. And Cecil Hurd as well. Let's get to your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Great to have you on board. And we begin in Louisiana. Hello, Leslie. Wesley, you're on the air. Go right ahead. Wesley, you there? Oh, okay. Let's try Sonny next. Hey, Sonny, go right ahead. We're going to have to... Sonny, you there? Well, we're going to have to reset our board here. You guys are going to have to hit it until we take a break. Let's go to Fred in Georgia. Go right ahead, Fred.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Fred.
First-time caller. Glad I got through, and been listening a long time. I wanted to ask you about the drop in LSU to 2 and Baylor moving up so many spots. I think it was 5 spots they moved up. And I'm wondering if they're not setting up a scenario where they will not have 2 SEC schools. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think they're doing anything right now, Fred, because if what happened last night is really irrelevant. I think if LSU wins out and Alabama wins and a confluence of events occurs, Alabama and LSU will get in. If Georgia wins out, I still think LSU is going to get in. Here's the problem with what we do in my industry. I'm on a program today with Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, and they're screaming and hollering. And I just want to tell them, calm down. Let's not overdo this, overthink it, because the only committee ranking that matters is the last one. I mean, this is a TV event. They do this to create controversy.
Yeah.
They do this to create chat. So don't be obsessed over it right now, please.
All right. I just wondered if LSU was to lose, but then bump down to 2, if that wouldn't set up for an Oklahoma beating a top 10 Baylor, and it just seemed kind of weird that Baylor moved.
Okay.
Up
Well, thanks for the call. I do really appreciate it. Let's continue with what was that? Iman is next.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul, in New York City.
Good afternoon.
You know, the more the committee talks, the more confusing it gets, because they say one thing and then they do another. They were showing all the reasons why Ohio State was number one. I thought you won and lost games as a complete team. It doesn't matter if you got the number 5 defense and you won all your games 50-20. LSU has the record, and the only difference between the two teams is the average points that Ohio State scores. But their strength of schedule, you would think that'd be the most prominent thing for anybody. But anyway, Paul, everybody's assuming that Nick Saban was campaigning to the football committee. You remember a few years back, his wife came on and made some public statements, and she was telling them how elite the fans felt and all that. You remember those comments?
She was rather, it's been a couple of years, but she certainly was rather
she was
snippy
harsh
about the fans, yeah.
And then, of course, Alabama lost that game. And when you sit back and just listen to what Nick's saying, he's talking to the fans, and Larry understood it. You heard all the fight, and Larry's gone. And Nick was talking to the fans. This is a tough game. We're not going to look good. We're not going to win it. Be prepared. I'm trying to tell you now that he wasn't talking to the committee. He wasn't sending a message. Well, he did send a message to his team if he's always sending one every time he's on TV. But anyway, Ward Damn Eagle, Paul, and I'll see you come Friday.
Good. We will be live in Auburn on Friday and look forward to seeing everyone who has time to come by and see us. John is up next in Memphis. Hey, John.
Good afternoon, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Aside from the confusion with the committee and the fact that this gives ESPN all week to promote Ohio State as the number one team, you've been to the committee's headquarters, have you not? Weren't you invited as a guest? Weren't you said to observe?
No, I have not been to their headquarters. I've been to, I served, me and 4,000 other media types have served on a mock committee.
Okay, so you've never been to Grapevine?
Well, I've been right outside. I have been to Grapevine, but I've never been to the CFP headquarters.
Well, I was just wondering, give the fans, could you kind of describe where is it, why there, and I'm assuming
Well, for those who don't know, Grapevine, Texas is right outside of Arlington, I believe. It's near the stadium. It just happens to be where the college football playoff offices are. It's the reason why they're located there. It's about a 5-minute drive from the airport at DFW, so it's really a good location. And I don't think. And by the way, they don't do it at the headquarters. They do it at a hotel out there. So listen, they want us to talk about this, and we are talking about it.
I know. All right. It just seems like this week they could have just mailed in the results. I mean, you vote for the
listen, I don't think it was difficult to guess what they were going to do. I mean, I'm really somewhat shocked at the reaction or meltdown to what they've done. Anyway, hey, thanks for the call. We're going to take a break. A lot to do on the program. Guests are coming. More of your phone calls when we come back. We're here on Thanksgiving Eve, and Greg is up next. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Paul. If we were living in Roman times and having all these discussions about the playoffs, most of these guys who are complaining about Alabama would do it in a hall called the vomitorium. Because I know after listening to all this nonsense the last couple of days, my vomit bucket is about full. So, if you're going to criticize Alabama's schedule, that's fine and well-founded, but you also have to criticize those who are competing against them for this spot in the playoffs. And, Clemson, we complain about it all the time, but the committee has never held Clemson's schedule to task since the inception of this committee, Paul.
Well, no, hold on a second. Clemson started off at the number 5 position, Greg, and I think that was indicative of their weak schedule.
Yeah. Well, and then, Utah is the one that we're supposedly competing against as well, and that's the darling now that Oregon has fallen by the wayside. But, if you put them in the SEC West and play the teams that Alabama's played, they've had at least 2 or 3 losses before they even get to this point. So I just think everybody needs to calm down, let everything play out. You've got games this weekend, and then you've got your conference championships, and then we'll get to the final decision-making point. But, Alabama just has to win this weekend and then let the chips fall where they may. If they don't take care of business, then it doesn't matter.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate the insight. Let's continue with more calls. And Gooch, maybe my favorite name of the
Paul.
day. Hey, Gooch.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, bud?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Great. I hadn't talked to you in a couple of years. I'm here in Oxford, Mississippi.
Well, it's a good place to be. I was there 2 weeks ago and loved it.
Well, I didn't run into you. I saw you out there one day when I was going to spin class that morning on the sidewalk. You remember that when you went up to NBC and you were talking with Morning Joe and them?
Oh, I sure do remember that. Yeah, that was last year.
Yeah. Well, I just want to ask you one question. I've always asked you this in years past, and I think this is a great idea. And with all this other chaos going on in the conference, and I'm so proud of everybody, Alabama and Georgia, everybody doing successful, everybody doing good. Ole Miss is trying to climb out of the cellar. But the SEC office is still in Birmingham. And you made a comment yesterday, and you said, you talking about, the Auburn moving the game to Auburn. And you said, well, they went up to the Legion Field and the guy had the red jacket on and everything. And I've been trying to tell you for years, there's corruption among the SEC office, just like it is in the government everywhere around the country. We need to move it to Destin, where we all want to be.
Well, you know something, Gooch? The SEC office has been in Birmingham for as long as I can remember. I don't think it was there 50 or 60 years ago, but it's been there at least, well, I think it was in Mississippi at one point. There's been a lot of conversation to move it to Atlanta or Nashville, but many years ago, the city of Birmingham gave the SEC like a $1 a month rent deal, and I'm serious, and it kept there. And listen, I think the commissioner of the SEC should answer this question, not me, because I have. Even though most people think I work for the SEC, I don't. I work for ESPN. I have no idea why. As long as it's in Birmingham, questions like that are fair. And
I laughed so hard the other day when you said you were under contract on the Stephen A. Smith show or something. You said,
yeah, what I said. What I said. Somebody asked me. It was on I think Greenberg or Stephen A.
I laughed so hard. I fell out.
They asked me why I agreed with Nick Saban, saying that Auburn was the best team they played, and I said my exact comment was I am contractually obligated to agree with everything Nick Saban says.
I know it. I laughed my butt off, but that's awesome. But don't you agree? Dustin would be the great place, the ultimate place to have the office.
Well, no, I mean, first of all, you have to. An important part of the SEC office. Was put in Birmingham because it was a central location, and a couple of times a year, all the coaches, football, basketball, all fly in. It's near the airport. It's a good location, but you're going to always get some. Now, I will tell you, 30 or 40 years ago, I think the attack about bias may have been accurate because there were a lot of people connected to the University of Alabama. But if you look at the office today, I mean, Greg Sankey is from upstate New York. Most of the number 2 person in the SEC, or one of the top people, is from Ole Miss. There is maybe an Alabama graduate. Well, the director of officiating is from Alabama. He's a University of Alabama graduate, and that's probably the one position there that gets the most criticism. Wouldn't you agree? So, I don't think it really matters where the office is. That's like we always get this controversy about where our studio is. It's not in the SEC, and I try to explain to people it doesn't really matter where you are. I've done throughout the last 3 or 4 months. I've done the show 2 days a week in New York. Is it any different because I'm, if I go through this wall behind me, I'm going to be in the East River than if I was doing it in Nashville? I mean, these things I think are just figments of people's imagination. Thanks for the call. Harrison is in Tuscaloosa. Hello, Harrison.
Hello, Paul.
What's up, bud?
I just like to talk today about how Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee has really improved so far. And they were 0-2, and now they went to 1-4, and now they're I believe 6-5 and bowl eligible. And most people, when it was I think 21-13 in the Alabama Tennessee game, thought that had changed. They were driving down the field, and of course that fumble messed everything up. But they've improved a lot. I think they've gotten better over the team. I think they're working pretty good, and they're doing pretty good so far.
Harrison, how old are you?
I'm 10.
Man, you're getting old, Harrison. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
I'm just visiting my grandparents right now.
Well, that will be fun. Well, listen, you're 100% correct about Jeremy Pruitt. He's done a really good job, and I think that's why so many people in Knoxville are upbeat. Well, listen. Be well, my friend. You have a great time with your grandparents, and have a really wonderful Thanksgiving. Let's talk to Matt, who is in Florida. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Good. As calling about the rankings that came out last night, I'm assuming you agree with Ohio State being number one, right?
I do agree, yes.
I do, too. I think you're right. I think that they deserve it. And that leads me to my next thing. First of all, I just got to say this. I'm a Florida fan. I'm not a conference fan. I don't really want to carry the water for the other teams. I respect other people if they do, but that's just not me. Having said that, I can't tell you how many people I've seen who say, oh, Ohio State's not good because they play in the Big Ten. I just don't know how you can rationally say that, and I can't tell you how many people who say that. You ever come across those people?
Yes. I mean, you better believe it.
Yeah, I mean, you can say, I think that they played some tough teams, but you can say that a team hasn't been tested, but I don't think you can rationally say a team isn't good just because they haven't really played anybody good. And a lot of people do that. I just don't get it.
Well, thank you for the call, Matt. Great to hear from you. Let's continue with more calls. Dan is up next in Indiana. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Yeah, up here in Big Ten country, although I was weaned on Notre Dame football. My question for you is, Paul, and I would like your opinion. It just seems to me the last couple of years there was an argument out there that could a team really be considered for the playoff if they did not win or at least qualify for their conference championship. And I've not heard anybody make that comment this year, and I would just like your opinion on that.
It's an age-old conversation, Dan, and I really don't buy it because every conference is different. And are you telling me winning the ACC is the same as winning the SEC? So could Alabama, with Clemson's schedule, win the ACC? Could Auburn, with Clemson's schedule? Could Florida? I mean, I can name you right now five schools in the SEC that would be undefeated with Clemson's schedule. So I think that's a very unfair conversation to have. I wish they would just choose the four best teams in the country, but they don't do that. Quick break. We'll talk about the future of Joe Moorhead and Matt Luke.
This is a big game for us, for our program, and national TV. It's really, quite frankly, a showcase game for the entire state of Mississippi. So excited about the opportunity. The health-wise, Scotty practiced yesterday, so I think he'll play. Ben Brown's going to be good to go. Benito cleared concussion protocol and practiced yesterday, so he'll also be good to go. Jonathan Haynes is probable. He's a little bit gimpy on his ankle, but I think as we move closer to Thursday night, I think he'll be ready to go. But excited about the opportunity. Obviously a huge game for a bunch of different reasons, but really excited, always excited for the Egg Bowl. I think this game stands alone. You can't worry about what happened last year. I mean, this is two brand new teams, different set of circumstances, but I think you really don't need any extra motivation when it comes to this game. It's very, very important on its own.
Matt, what do you see out of their defense off of film, in particular their ability to stop the run?
I think they're very athletic. And, they do a good job of movement and creating negative plays in the backfield. They have a very good pressure system. Coach Shoup does a good job with that. And, but I think that's the movement and their ability to blitz and get in the backfield and create negative plays. That's what you see when you turn the tape on.
Coach, who sticks out to you this season with Mississippi State? Who, I guess, is a unique character specifically with that offense that you'll have to prepare for this week coming up?
Well, the obvious is Kylan Hill. He's the leading rusher in the Southeastern Conference. He's a very, very good player, and he does a great job, making people miss, breaking tackles, yards after contact. All those things he's very, very good at. And so, both quarterbacks can run the football. That you add that dimension, you gotta account for all 11 guys all the time, and then the play actions off of it.
Defensively, anybody on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think they got several young defensive linemen that show up. They do a really, really good job there. They're long at corner, do a good job of press man. But just what I alluded to earlier, what they do a really good job with is their pressures. They bring pressure and create negative plays. So I think that'll be a big key for us, is staying on schedule and not letting the pressure, cause turnovers and things like that, because they've been able to do that some as well. I think Coach Bignell has done an outstanding job, because I think where they are right now is where they were, after the Memphis game. It's a different unit. So I think they have improved game to game, and I thought they've done a good job of gelling, coming together. But I just like the way that they play. It's a cohesive unit, and they're really playing good, playing hard, football. They're doing a good job.
Welcome back. Just heard from Coach Matt Luke during the break, and who better to get the pulse of Mississippi than Bo Bounds, the talk show host in Jackson. Bo, good to have you on. Happy Thanksgiving. It's been a long time. Hope all is well.
Finebaum, how you doing, bud?
Doing great. So let's talk about this game tomorrow night and what is at stake.
Well, Joe Moorhead's job is on the line. And so if he loses, I think they'll make a change. And if he wins, he'll have an opportunity to come back. And it looks like Matt Luke's playing with house money regardless of the outcome tomorrow night.
Bo, I got that impression. I was in Oxford 2 weeks ago, and it just seemed like now that the AD situation has been resolved, that he's okay. But let's talk about Moorhead. And I'm not trying to put words in someone's mouth from 6 weeks ago, but the AD, John Cohn, made this impassioned argument to me about how great Joe Moorhead was and how he goes to practice. And I realized that was a couple of losses ago, but I'm just trying to figure out, why did he say what he did 6 weeks ago and why so different today, assuming he loses this game?
Well, I don't know as far as, from John's point of view, but I can tell you what we're hearing in and outside of Starkville is that the lack of accountability and discipline has raised eyebrows. And, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, Paul. But when you don't have the toughness component and the accountability and the discipline, and when you play the way they played against Tennessee and A&M, I think that's a real problem within the fan base. And the expectations were raised under Dan Mullen, as you know. And this team really has no identity. I mean, here you are 25 games in with Joe Moorhead, and you really don't know who they are, what they are, where they're going, especially on the offensive side of the football. Let me give you an example, Paul. Ole Miss has probably the most explosive running QB on the ground in college football. The young man's a star with a unique skill set. And he's going to get better throwing the ball, Plumlee. But, and so they're really not known as a passing team this year, yet they have better passing stats than MSU, and Moorhead's considered an offensive guru, but a guy that understands how to develop a real high-level passing game. And they're 25 games in, and you don't see it. And I think that's a real problem, Paul, and I think that's why he's coaching for his job tomorrow night. And I think if they lose, and I expect them to, Mississippi State that is, I think if they lose, then John Cohen and Mark Keenum will decide to make a change on Friday, Saturday at the latest, and they'll be in another coaching search 2 years post Dan.
A couple of questions here. Number one, why would a win, and I understand the state, okay, but why would a win over an average Ole Miss team, let's be honest,
Sure.
that has upside, make smart people, and I know Dr. Keenum a lot better than I know John Cohen, and I think Mark Keenum is one of the premier educators in this country. Why would those two
Me too.
realize or determine, okay, he beat Ole Miss, and we're good with another year of what we've seen over the last 2 years?
Well, I think that he'll sit down with John Cohen either way on Friday, if he does win, if he's able to win the game tomorrow night.
Okay.
Then I think that they will lay out the changes that they want made in the program, hoping that the changes and another year and this young quarterback in Garrett Schrader, who I think is he's a different player, but just as talented as a Plumlee and some of the other young guys in this league and around the country, I think that's something that they can move forward with. The fan base is not going to be happy either way, Paul. They want to win tomorrow night, but they don't want Joe coming back. The overwhelming majority of them. Okay, so
hold on, Bo. So you're saying
here.
you're saying regardless of tomorrow night, the overwhelming majority of the Mississippi State fan base do not want Moorhead back.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
With everything that we receive, texts, calls, tweets, and so on the show, which is several thousand over the course of a football season, they do not want either way, but they want to win the game.
Of course.
But they don't want Moorhead back. So I don't know. It's a great question. What you posed, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. If he were to win, how does he win the fan base back? I don't even think a win in the battle for the Golden Egg will necessarily win the fan base back, but they'll be happy for a few weeks.
Bo, am I wrong to remember when John Cohen hired Moorhead? Most people praised Cohen, talking about how it was a stealth coaching search. You juxtapose that with what Tennessee did. And it seemed like home run hire is cliche when you can't think of anything else to say, but most people praised the hire.
They did. They sure did. And I think I think the fan base is struggling with John Cohen as a baseball coach, Paul. He took the program to the national championship series and had a lot of success. Everything about John's program was built on toughness, accountability, and discipline. And so I think that's why people are a little confused as to why the toughness component that Dan Mullen instilled in the program and the accountability piece has been, what most people believe, has been lost in the last 2 years. And I don't think Joe knew exactly what he was walking into as far as the level of play and how physically and mentally tough you have to be in this league. And, Paul, that's even at the Blue Bloods. You know that. Even at Bama, Florida, LSU, because they've gone through coaches where they haven't had it. If you don't have that, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter what's on the name of the front of your jersey. And you can't win without it. And the whole we're going to outsmart people, I don't think that's what this league is built on. I think the league's built on toughness and physicality.
Is there confidence in the state fan base in John Cohen making another coaching hire based on the last one?
Yes, I think there is. Because of what you just said about 2 minutes ago, that everybody in the college football world praised Moorhead and his track record and turning around Penn State's offense when James Franklin was on the ropes, and so on and so forth. So I do believe – I'm not saying everybody in the fan base will be on board, but I believe that Dr. Keenum and his executive leadership is 100% behind John getting it right if they lose tomorrow night.
Okay, so the feeling is we have the right athletic director. He just happened to make a bad choice that we all agreed with, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, bad fit.
Okay. And you believe Ole Miss is going to win the game?
I do. I believe Ole Miss is tougher. I think Rich Rod and McIntyre have done a really good job. Really good job. I mean, those two guys are legit. I think Plumlee will be the most explosive player on the field all night. And you could argue his teammate, Jerrion Ely, will be the second most explosive player on the field. But I think to win a game where the talent is a push in a rivalry game, and it's a conference game, I think toughness wins the day, so to speak. And I think Ole Miss, even though they're not really good, Ole Miss is going to be – you have to be tough for 4 quarters to win a game like tomorrow night. And I don't think Mississippi State is, and I think Ole Miss is. And I think they're better coached right now.
A lot to chew on there. And listen, there are a million other questions, but there's no reason to ask them until we see what happens tomorrow night. And you know where they are. Bo, great to have you on. I think you'll have a lot to talk about in the aftermath of this game.
No doubt. Thanks, Paul. Take care.
Always a pleasure. Great to have you on. Bo Bounds. He's got a pretty good pulse in that state. That's quite a lot to chew on there. I mean, he said it as clear as the blue sky that Moorhead is going to be out if he can't win tomorrow night's game. We'll take a break. More of your phone calls.
Moving forward, obviously, huge week, Egg Bowl week, rivalry week. And know it's a game that means a ton to both schools, to the people of the state of Mississippi, to our players, to our coaches, to our fans. So, we can't wait to get on the field tonight and start preparations. Obviously, a lot of the kids have played against each other. We recruited a bunch of guys on their team. And, it's a game that's going to be played with great emotion, great passion, and, very excited to get to our second installation of it and make sure we're doing everything that we need to make sure that beautiful trophy stays put here in the Seal Building. It'll be a game where we honor our 26 seniors in their final game for the Maroon and White, guys who have done a ton over their careers to bring a lot of positive success to Mississippi State. So we'll make sure we send those guys out the right way. And it'll also be a game where we honor the teams from 1998 and 1999, 8-5 SEC West champs, and then the 10-2 team as well, led by the legendary Jackie Sherrill. So I think that'll be a great opportunity as well to pay respect to a couple of very, very impressive teams in Mississippi State history. Yeah, I mean, being a part of Pitt, Penn State, and growing up around Pitt, West Virginia, the backyard brawl, and you talk about two schools, with a lot in common and passionate fan bases, and I don't think you really quite understand it till you're in it, and I think. Leading up to the game, I got a pretty decent idea, but, once the game started and obviously, unfortunately, afterward, you kind of really got a true sense of what the rivalry means. Yeah, I think the kids are aware of it, and it's not something really that we even need to talk about. They know that we're right on the cusp of bowl eligibility, and, we got to win this one to get to the postseason, and, I don't believe in feeling pressure. I believe in applying pressure. So they know that we need to have a great week of preparation. We'll start tonight on the field, and, we got to do two things. Make sure we play well and keep the egg here in Starkville. And if we do that, then we'll extend the season and get to play in the bowl game.
Welcome back. Glad to have all of you on board. Let's talk to Jim in Mississippi. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Paul, how you doing today? Happy Thanksgiving.
We are doing great. Nice of you to join us.
I appreciate you letting me on. And it kind of dovetails in what Bo was saying. My dad played for Mississippi State back in the late 50s, 55 to 59. And he and I are currently arguing. He is one of those that thinks regardless of whether they win or not tomorrow, that Moorhead should be gone. And I'm of the other side of the coin that thinks that you should give him a little bit more time, especially in light of the fact that they were saddled with some violations that happened over the off season, and the suspension of a lot of the players. Some of them were starters, some of them weren't, but it's just it's one of those things that I think they should give the guy a little bit more time. And if they do decide to make a change, in your opinion, who would be a good fit? Who would be able to fill the position that the university expects as far as being able to take that program back up to the level that it has been in the past?
Jim, that's a great question, and I'm not deflecting it, but I think you have to, if you listen to what Bo Bowden said, you have to find somebody that understands the key ingredients of winning in the SEC. You just don't go into the into the coaching portal and grab a hot coach, because that doesn't always work. Now, it just so happened that Dan Mullen worked very well, but Dan Mullen also knew the SEC. Joe Moorhead was a hot young coach, but he didn't understand the league, and I think that's unfortunately been one of his downfalls. I mean, I'm not saying he couldn't ultimately move this program in the right direction. You and I both know he followed a very difficult act.
Absolutely. The name has been bandied around about Mike Norvell at Memphis. I live in Memphis currently, and I've been able to see that program rebound from, getting up off the mat when Tommy West basically called him out and said, "Look, you're not going to put more effort into the program. If you're not going to do more to get to the program to the level that you want it, then just do away with the program." Now,
Tommy West deserves credit for that program. I mean, that was an amazing rant that he gave. And listen, I grew up in Memphis as well, and the Memphis program was laughable for so long.
Right. Well, it's certainly not laughable now.
No.
It's an enjoyable bunch to watch.
I've heard a lot of crazy names out there. I mean, the issue right now is you're competing with Arkansas, which, somebody brought up Lane Kiffin at Arkansas yesterday, and I wasn't sure I heard him correctly, but I've heard more about Lane Kiffin today than I have in a while. So, whether that's a possibility at Arkansas, I don't know. State, I think, is a little bit of a different job, and you just can't show up at State without understanding. The State people, I think, are unique. I mean, they're great fans. You are one of them. You know what I'm talking about. But they have to believe in you. And I think Moorhead, and maybe because I was there, I saw it. But it just seemed like that meeting with Florida last year, when Dan Mullen just really outcoached him badly, was a bad omen.
And you make a very good point. I appreciate you taking my call, but I spoke with you last year about this same time, and I think you'll remember the call. You had a gentleman on your show that had been to 60 straight Iron Bowls, and a quite remarkable record. But I think I mentioned to you a little bit of SEC and Egg Bowl history. There's a gentleman from my hometown, little town between Jackson and Memphis, Winona, Mississippi, and he has been to, or had been to, 80 straight Egg Bowl games.
That's amazing.
The only game that he missed was during World War II, when the game was not played. And I think that's one of those records that is up there with the consecutive hit record. That it's just one of those records that's not going to be
80
broken.
straight. That's listen. I mean, doing anything consistently is difficult, but 80 straight is remarkable. Jim, thanks for sharing it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks again, Paul.
What an amazing call. That was really, 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 really cool. Paul is in Texas. Hey, Paul.
Hello, Paul. How are you? I'm a first-time caller.
Great to have you on.
Okay. I'm calling about Tua's injury when he was playing Mississippi State. Saban had no business of putting Tua in that game. when they had a perfectly capable Mac Jones that was supposedly a pretty good quarterback. If I was the president of that University of Alabama, I would have had Saban's head, but because he is the ultimate boss, he has the final say. That was wrong of Saban, and Saban ruined his career. And that's all I have to say. And
well, Paul, first of all, the president of the university has nothing to do with who plays and who doesn't, and he shouldn't. He runs the university. As far as to his career, I don't think it's over. Mel Kiper right now has him ranked as the second quarterback in the draft. Now, we don't know what his health's going to be, but doctors are pretty upbeat. But thanks anyway for calling. Has arrived, and what a week this is. Everyone loves Thanksgiving week because it is a couple of days off, and it's also great football, and we have plenty of that this weekend. And let's get right to it as we begin the last week of the regular season.
This one simply says, Texas is terrible. Low-hanging fruit or truth?
That's 100% true.
Yeah.
I mean, dumpster fire is used too often. I don't think it is a dumpster fire. I just think it's sad that Texas is still Texas, which is not impressive.
Can we just say they're backwards?
I think it's better for Tennessee, rather than to have, a couple of those top 25 victories, to beat all the teams in the SEC East that you're trying to pass to at least, get yourself into the top tier.
That's why I asked you, have you been to a doctor? Because I think you really need to go see a doctor other than your wife.
The most important thing, I've had the support of my bosses here at ESPN, and that's all that matters to me.
You have an unranked opponent who scores on you on 8 consecutive possessions.
No, I wouldn't let Oklahoma within 100 miles of the college football playoff this year.
Everyone's worried about LSU, to be honest. And it is actually interesting that the focus just goes completely past Georgia Tech, not just because it's a rivalry game, not just because it's on the road, but because with Georgia's offensive troubles, if Georgia doesn't fix those offensive troubles, the game could be close for a while.
There's no excuse for Bama's schedule. They could be in a better situation if they were a better team. But I just don't see Bama being in the number 4 spot tonight. I think, or tomorrow night, I think the polls stay the same.
And this, you're not going to believe, Todd Grantham. That guy should have been a head coach a long time ago.
I think even with Mac, Bama is better than Georgia.
And, man, I'm just tired of the Big 12 not getting any respect, man.
Well, I'm a big LSU fan, and that's part of it, Paul.
Well, it's been a great year then.
Yes, sir.
All of you, be careful out there. Brandon is up next in New Orleans. Hello, Brandon.
Hey, Paul. How you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your staff.
Appreciate it.
I have more of a statement than a question, and you can comment. I just want our LSU nation and the voices, including Ryan Clark and Marcus Spears, who I watch pretty much every day, to just don't be in such a frantic that we move down to number 2, because I want us to take care of Texas A&M first, and then Georgia in the Georgia Dome, and then once we get to the CFP, we take care of business there, and then we will know, the last team standing will know who is the number 1 team in the country.
That makes sense, Brandon. You think we can figure that one out?
Well, I hope so.
Well, I will make sure the right people heard your phone call. Thank you very, very much. Rick is in Ohio. Hello, Rick. Nice of you to call.
Hey, Paul. First of all, I wanted to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. As a Buckeye fan and being a Big Ten supporter, I've got to tell you, I really enjoy listening to your show in the afternoon. So
thank you.
I have a hypothetical for you at this point because I was talking to your screener, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the Heisman's shaping up. It looks like Burrows, barring any setbacks, is going to run away with this. But if Chase Young would not have had that 2-game suspension, do you feel that his play on the field is similar to what Woodson did in '97 and possibly would have made it a closer race for the Heisman?
Rick, great question. I was on Get Up this morning with Greenberg and Desmond Howard, and I gave my Heisman selections. I had Burrow, Chase Young, and Justin Fields, and Desmond Howard just went ballistic saying How can you put Chase Young in there because of the suspensions? Suspensions don't bother me at all. And I'll answer your other part of the question in a minute. To me, the NCAA ruling him ineligible was a crock, and I think you know it as a Buckeye fan. I don't think it really mattered. It didn't matter to me. 2 more games, may have helped him a little bit. I think the problem with Chase Young isn't being a defensive player. I think it's Joe Burrow. He has been so dominant, almost perfect this year, that it's hard to take a vote away from him.
Right. Hey, last question for you. Any thoughts on the Ohio State-Michigan game, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, right now, surprisingly, I'm leaning toward Michigan.
Really? Okay.
Part of my rationale there is, listen, I believe Ohio State's a better team. I just wonder, though, about the emotional hangover from Penn State, the fact that they are going to the Big Ten championship game. I'm not saying players are sitting around going, okay, we can lose a game, let's go out there and lose. That's not the way it is. But I don't see how I don't see how they start this game at the same emotional level that they did last week. And listen, I don't need to educate you on the other side of the ball. Michigan. Michigan's had a decent season without winning against Ohio State. It's just another Jim Harbaugh 9-3, 9-4 record.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate your take, and we'll definitely keep tuning in to listen.
Can't wait. Thanks for the call. John is up next in Baton Rouge. Hello, John.
Hey, Paul. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Glad you're sounding better. Glad you're not sick anyway. I just wanted to mention that, I'm a big LSU fan, and everyone seems to kind of be taking it for granted that LSU is going to beat A&M. Everybody's talking about Georgia. And I wanted to point out that LSU hasn't played in the rain yet this year. Played on a wet field, but they haven't actually played in the rain, and they are predicting rain for Saturday night in Baton Rouge. So we'll have to see how that's going to affect, especially the offense for LSU. But
listen, we've seen with two Georgia games this year that the rain's a big deal. I haven't seen the forecast. Is it supposed to be Saturday night?
Yeah, it's supposed to start around game time and increase as the game goes on, if these weathermen have a clue what they're talking about.
Well, listen, I'm not here to attack the credibility of weathermen, but
right.
But I would take the odds of a football pundit like me getting a prediction right better than a weatherman 48 hours out.
Right. I wanted to mention a couple of things that maybe listeners hadn't thought about. Old Coach John McKay was at Southern Cal many years ago, and I don't know if people realize it, excuse me, but he's on Coach O's staff at LSU now. He's kind of on up in age.
I vaguely remember reading about that. For those of you who don't know, for those who don't know John McKay, we're talking about one of the great football coaches of his generation.
Right.
This was a contemporary.
And one of the most hilarious, in my view, he made a quote years ago. A reporter was asking him, they had lost the game.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going here.
He said, what do you have to say about the execution of your team? He said, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think that was the winless Tampa Bay Bucks, quarterback by Steve Spurrier.
Right, I believe you're right.
That is. Listen, I have a quote book at home. I considered doing a book on famous football quotes once, so I was reading a bunch of them, and that's as good a quote as I've ever heard. I mean, and I don't know Coach McKay, but I mean.
Also, I wanted to touch on also the way nowadays how things have changed so much. Somebody gets an injury now, and they got a big tent set up on the sideline where nobody can see what's going on. And I can remember when Richard Todd got injured in an Alabama game, and Coach Bryant had him stripped down to a jock strap sitting on the bench, and nobody even held a towel up behind the full moon there. And that was pretty entertaining, but it was a long time ago. But now they got the big tent that they put him in where you can't see what's happening. But kind of bothers me that the highest paid employee in the state of Louisiana and practically every state is a football coach.
Well, that's
Seems
just the
like
way it is,
whatever.
John. By the way, thanks for the call. And let me quickly jump in here. And the family of John McKay, who was a great football coach, I'm sure is probably less than amused to hear that their dad, who died in 2001, is still coaching on the LSU football staff. What John was referring to wasn't John McKay, but John Robinson, who also coached at Southern Cal. He also coached, I think, with the Rams. I believe he won a national championship at Southern Cal, and then he came back. But John McKay's been dead nearly 18 years. John Robinson, thankfully, is alive and well. John McKay is responsible for that execution quote, though, but he is not alive on the LSU staff. Let's talk to Doug, who is in South Carolina. Hello, Doug.
Hey, Paul. How you doing today?
We're doing great. Thanks a lot.
Well, let me wish you a happy Thanksgiving for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I got two little questions for you. And in your opinion, don't you think they start this college football playoff ranking just a little bit too early? Because like you and I have talked on several occasions, the only one that counts is the last one.
Yeah, listen, I'm consistently troubled by it for this reason, because it is good for the sport to have conversation. The problem is a lot of people that are doing the conversation have no idea what they're talking about.
Well, that's true. That's very true. Another thing, 8 teams would be better than 4, but we know we can't go down that road because they've already signed a deal that goes so far. Now, the other thing is, I'm a Clemson Tiger fan.
Yes.
And I got a hard shell. I can take it. I understand our schedule's been weak this year, and I understand naturally there's a lot of teams in this country that think that our schedule doesn't warrant us getting into the playoffs. But I've heard several of your colleagues say that if we do run the table and we go undefeated, that we're the one team that most people don't want to meet in the playoff. My question to you is, do you think that Clemson's a good enough football team, barring just what you see, how they play and everything? Do you think they can be competitive against the other 3 teams in the college football playoff?
Doug, I most certainly do. And I was suspicious of Clemson early on, but I'm no longer. I've watched them a couple of times, and to me, their defense has impressed me more than anything else. I mean, I almost feel sorry for Trevor Lawrence that he was pressing so much early on, just trying to, I think, to keep the games interesting for himself. But now that he's settled down, he's still a great quarterback, and I think it really depends on the matchup. But yeah, I mean, Clemson. I do the same ballot every other sports talking head does, and they were number 3 in my ballot last week. So I think that speaks for itself.
And one last thing, Paul. To that caller earlier that wanted to call in and blame Coach Saban, you can't blame any football coach for playing a kid that wants to play. I'm sure that Tua came to Coach Saban and said, "Coach, I want to play as long as you'll let me play." And Coach Saban probably said, "Well, you hadn't done no 2-minute drills lately, so let's do it." What happened to Tua was a freakish accident. It could have happened to anybody. I mean, you can't blame a coach for being a coach.
I agree with you, and I think I was just like everybody else when I saw and heard about the injury. I mean, you get mad, you start blaming, and then you settle down and realize what it's all about. It's football. It's really sad, but for Tua to have gotten hurt, Doug, medical staff had to give him the go-ahead. The player had to give the go-ahead, and obviously the coach had to give the go-ahead. It's just
a
freakish thing.
That's true. And I'm going to say this. Coach Saban is one of the best football coaches, just like Coach Bryant, that ever stepped on the field. I mean, even though he's our adversary and everything, you got to have respect for the man. He's a great football coach, and I'm sure that South Carolina would love to hire him if they want to run him off from Alabama.
Yeah, no, I don't have much doubt about that. Hey, Doug, thank you. Appreciate the call. Appreciate the kind words. Let's go to a break. We'll talk to Bill Hancock in the next hour. He's the head of the college football playoff.
Each other.
Good though. Welcome back. We are continuing the phone calls here at 855-242-7285. And Larry is up next. Hey, Larry.
Oh, howdy, Paul. First-time caller.
Thank you very much.
I want to say I enjoy your show. I've been watching it for a year now, and I love college football, and your show provides a forum for people like us to argue and guess and have a fun time with it. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much.
I've got a question that no one agrees with me on this. They think I'm crazy. If you were the AD at Arkansas, and for the sake of this conversation, the AD at Mississippi State, and you were looking for a new head coach, would you consider former Georgia Tech coach Paul Johnson? And if not, why?
I wouldn't, no. Primarily because I felt like the end of his tenure at Georgia Tech was unimpressive, and I'm not sure his offense is easy to travel.
Easy to travel?
Well, I mean, listen. I mean, you've seen the how he runs the offense. It's complicated, and I don't. I mean, you tell me. I mean, is a triple option going to work?
It sure worked against Alabama with tiny little Georgia Southern, didn't it?
Well, I mean, you're talking about
more trouble stopping Georgia Southern than any other SEC team.
Larry, come on, don't be crazy, okay? I mean, that was a one-off where Alabama probably didn't spend 5 minutes preparing for the game. They were preparing for the Auburn game, and they cared about as much about that game as a scrimmage in early March. But if you're going to listen, I'm just telling you, I wouldn't hire Paul Johnson, but you're more than welcome to recommend him. What's he doing right now, by the way?
I don't know. I know he has a hard time recruiting, and it will be tough to recruit for that offense. The media hates it, players hate it, mothers hate it. Everybody doesn't like it, but it sure is an effective way to move the ball. I remember watching that Orange Bowl where they throttled a good Mississippi State team.
Listen, I'm not going to argue with his success. I mean, he won at a lot of places, from Georgia Southern to Navy, and he had a decent run at Georgia Tech. But his last couple of years were erratic, and there's no compelling reason to hire him. And besides, I don't think age should be used against someone. But I don't think at his age, he would be an inspiring choice. But I do appreciate your call. Thanks a lot. That was the strangest coaching suggestion I've heard in a long time. Bill is up next in Tennessee. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Paul. How are you doing?
We're doing great. Thanks a lot.
Happy Thanksgiving, you and your family. I just want to ask a question about the SEC championship game. If Georgia hangs in there with LSU to the game and comes down to a 3-point win, LSU side, how do you think the committee will look at that with Georgia?
Not very favorably, because that would be a second loss for Georgia, and they do have some impressive wins against Florida, and obviously against Auburn and Notre Dame. But I think losing a conference championship game would hurt them badly, as it did last year. It's interesting. Gene Smith, the athletic director at Ohio State, said today that one reason he got off the committee was because he couldn't believe that Ohio State was ranked after a 2-loss Georgia team. That's a comment that will resonate with this committee. So I think there's virtually no chance that Georgia would be under consideration. Now, there's one possibility: Alabama losing, Oklahoma losing, Minnesota losing, Utah losing. So there's virtually no really good fourth team. I mean, it could happen, but it would take it would take a calamity of errors for Georgia to be under consideration. Thank you for the call, though. I do appreciate it. Ryan is in Starkville. You're on the air.
Paul, can you write me a Friday morning's headline?
Well, I happen to agree with Bo Bounds. I'm slightly favoring Ole Miss in this game. What about you?
Yeah, me too, man. We're pulling for the Rebels. I think Moorhead's got to go. He's never really fit in Mississippi. You know what I mean?
You know, I hate that, but that's a big part of college football, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this guy. My encounters with him have been many, and he's a cordial guy, but I don't think he's ever going to make it in this league. So, quite frankly, I'm not sure winning the game matters. I don't think winning that game against a team that's 4-7, I think that's what their record is, is really is enough of a factor to convince my fan base, assuming I'm running Mississippi State, that he's going to get anything, that it's going to be any better next year.
Well, I think a win gives the Cohen and the president a glimpse of hope, maybe. You know what I mean? And
I think what it really comes down to is this. If you could tell me who the next coach would be by firing him, then I could better answer the question whether he should go or not.
Right. But I go back to Sinclair Barkley makes most people look real good.
So my question to you is, if Joe left, who would you hire?
Well, I think I would have to look first to Memphis, I think it's Norvell at Memphis, just simply because he knows the region. And then after that, I'm not real sure where I would go.
Yeah, listen, I think Norvell would be a coach that would fit in. I don't have any doubt about that. Hey, thanks for the call, Ryan. Appreciate it. Mike is up next in South Carolina. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
We're doing well. Thank you, Mike.
Well, what my question is how much you think we're going to beat Clemson Saturday?
I don't give you any chance to beat Clemson.
Why? We beat Georgia.
I don't care what you did. I mean, you give me a compelling reason why outside of that one game, what has South Carolina done this year to beat an elite team? I mean, I realize that happened, but Georgia had a lot to do with that.
You think they did, eh? Well,
listen. I'm not going to argue with you about a team that's 4-7. I mean, if you think South Carolina's going to win the game, why don't you tell me why?
Well, on a given day, anybody can lose.
Try to give me a reason, Mike, other than one of the tiredest cliches in history.
Well, I think it's about time for the tables to be turned.
No, I asked you to give me something other than a cliche. Happen. Okay, you're 0 for 2 on my question. You want to try one more time?
Well, whatever. I can ask my buddy Mickey.
Oh, well, you need to do that then. You call Mickey up right now. Man, it sounds like me trying to answer a football question. Mary is up next. Hey, Mary.
Hey, Paul. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Mary.
I know this is a short week for you. Well, not really, but, I really do want to say I'm disappointed in some of the Alabama fans that just think we're going to go into Auburn and get beat. As an Alabama fan, you're not supposed to feel that way about your team. You're supposed to believe in them, right? I mean,
well, but the question though is I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of friends who don't think they're going to win down there, and they're great fans. I think you have to be realistic as a fan. You either think your team is good or not. I'm not a big believer in blind ambition.
Well, I think we're good. I think that our offense is good, and I think Mac is doing a good job. No,
here's the real question, Mary. What is the difference between Mac Jones and Bo Nix?
Well, I think he has more experience in that he has been in the system for several years. I mean, he came in when Tua came in, so he has been learning the system, whereas Bo is a freshman, and he hasn't. Yes, he's
No, you're
seen
right.
a lot of.
I mean, Bo has tremendous upside, but he's been erratic.
He has. I think that anything can happen in any football game. I mean, you look at what happened in 2013. I mean, 2013, and yeah, that was a crazy, run back 100 yards from Davis on Auburn's team. But I'm just saying, yes, Auburn has a great defense. I don't think that they can beat us. I think it's going to be close, and I'll be the first to call on Monday, no matter whether we win or lose. But I just think they need to have some more faith in their team and in Saban. And then, again, this is an odd year, and I have to look at this as 2019. So that in itself, to me, gives me a little hope. It's not an
Mary,
even
thank
year.
you. Have a great holiday tomorrow, and we'll take a break. More to come. Bill Hancock is around the corner in about 30 minutes.
We've had some incredible games, as you well know, over the years. The '89 game, Auburn fans still, there's so much kind of attachment to that. And it's crazy that for a lot of those people that it's already been 30 years. But you go down the line, you've had the kick six and the comeback, and even that game 2 years ago, in which Auburn won and then Alabama went on to win a national championship. There just seems to be a lot more kind of hype around it. I think in part because of the Tua injury and the hangover that's kind of lingered over the Alabama fan base. There's just a general lack of, I don't want to say interest, but just lack of, again, excitement about what's going to happen in this game. I think there's almost a resigned acceptance from Alabama fans that even if they win, they're probably not getting into the playoffs. We saw it 2 years ago again after they lost and didn't make the SEC championship. Nick Saban was very active in trying to build a case, whether it was on ESPN airwaves or in other areas, try to get his team into it. And so, I think that it's possible to flip it someone really meant the defensive line and not purely just the team. But, it wouldn't surprise me certainly to try to build up this game because, if Alabama wins, it's clearly going to be the best win that they have all season. And so he needs that win to feel important, to feel like it's a big deal, and to remind people that Auburn is a really good team, even if they already have 3 losses. So, it's just kind of what he has to do. And so I think we're kind of starting to see that process already. And I think that we'll see if Alabama wins that game, you're going to see Saban kind of point to how good that Auburn team is to try to kind of build the case to get into the playoffs. I think that Auburn's always going to be compared to Alabama. And given the amount of success that Nick Saban has had, that's always going to be what Auburn fans want. And so when they're not able to consistently win at the level that Alabama has, and when they've, especially this year, really blown good opportunities to get these kind of marquee wins that you need to compete for a national championship, that's going to lead to fan, resentment, growing frustrations. And I think what's particularly, different about this year, again, is that, and I've mentioned this on your program before, that, Gus taking the play calling and taking, really making the offense his thing. Well, when the offense is the biggest problem with your team, that's going to lead to some serious fan frustration.
Welcome back. Let's go to Steve in Knoxville. Hey, Steve, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul, how you doing? First-time caller.
Well, great to have you.
My question is about the bowl situation and the seeding. When players declare they're not going to play because they're going to the NFL, I would like to see a deadline that they can announce that. So maybe the bowls would be somehow switched if enough players from one team decided to sit out. You know what I'm saying?
Here's the deal. Most of the players don't really know. They have until January to declare. So it's more of a personal preference. So I don't think that would work. And by the way, the bowls are not going to be dictated by the players. The bowl tie-ups are done at the end of the championship weekend, and you really wouldn't know which way the players are going anyway. Hey, thank you for the call. Tim is in Omaha. Hello, Tim. Go right ahead.
Hey, Paul, long-time listener, second-time caller.
Thank you.
Hey, wanted to talk about maybe Arkansas. I don't think they have any business being in the SEC anymore. They can't compete, let alone in their own division. They need to move to the Big 12, be more competitive. I mean, they have 2 games in Little Rock. They can't host recruits. So that's the downfall number one. And it's hard to get to Fayetteville anytime to get to a game. I think that's why they have 2 game sites. I didn't know if you thought maybe they should move to the Big 12 to even compete, because they'll never win a conference or a division title ever again in the SEC.
Well, first of all, there's a financial aspect of this, which I don't think Arkansas would ever consider leaving the SEC. There's too much money. Remember, the SEC network pays tens of millions of dollars a year to supplement sports other than football and basketball, and the Big 12 does not have that. The Big 12 has a good contract, but they don't have their own network. It's not happening. It's not even on the table. But thank you for the call. Jeff calls us next from Columbus. Hello, Jeff. Hey, Jeff. Unusual of Jeff not to answer the bell, but maybe he's eating his turkey and dressing. Ed is up next in South Carolina. Hello, Ed.
Hey, Paul, I just want to tell you, you have got the best show on TV, and I want you to have a great Thanksgiving, okay?
Thank you very much.
And I live for your show every day, okay?
That means a lot. Thank you.
I've got a thing. Considering everything that's happened at Kentucky, I think this may be Mark Stoops' best coaching job, even better than last year even.
Really?
I mean, he lost his quarterbacks. He lost everything, you know, and even a couple offensive linemen. They're back now, you know. But don't you think he's done a great job this year, really?
I do. I think Mark is a phenomenal coach.
And he took his name out of Florida State, so he's not going down there. So he's going to be back next year probably, you know. So. But
well, listen, I don't mean to disbelieve anything a coach says, but I do disbelieve everything coaches say. And until that job is filled, I will withhold judgment.
Well, I understand that. I really do. But I think he's done a hell of a job this year. I really, really do. Yeah.
Well, we agree. Thank you very much. Cameron is up next. Hello, Cameron.
Hey, Paul. Hey, I just want to ask you, how do you think Mac Jones is going to fare against Auburn's defense, knowing he has 3, possibly 4 first-round draft picks going to the NFL?
Well, listen, I'm sure Steve Sarkisian probably knows that too, and he's working on it right now. I mean, listen, I think it's self-explanatory what he's going to try to do, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really think those receivers, when they're having a good game, I don't think nobody in the country can stop them. If Mac Jones, if he can just get the ball to the receivers, I don't see why they couldn't blow Auburn out. Possibly.
Well, I doubt sincerely that that's going to happen. But thanks for the call. Victor is up next in Oklahoma. Hey, Victor.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Your show is wonderful, and I always enjoy your
Thank you.
Your comments. I have just a statement. I want you to comment on it, please. Don't you wish Nick Saban had an Aflac insurance policy named Jalen Hurst?
I'm sure he would like that, but listen, I mean, he got a lot out of Jalen, especially last year. And no one thought Jalen was going to stick around. And quite frankly, Jalen should not have stuck around.
Mm-hmm. But still, he would have made a good insurance policy. Like he would have got some money back on his investment.
Yeah, well, listen, now with all the money Saban made off the Aflac commercials, he probably could have let Jalen a couple of mansions.
That's true. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Great to have you on. We're up against a break. Bill Hancock in 20 minutes. Your phone calls continue on Thanksgiving Eve. We're coming right back.
To
run more spread plays. This was a team that was max protect for most to run more spread plays. This was a team that was max protect for most of the year. Bring in a tight end, an extra running back to block because their pass protection was not good. So that was the first time where they thought, okay, if we get more guys out of the backfield, produce more options to throw for Joe Burrow, we'll give up less sacks. And it worked out. Part of it, Burrow admitted, was because they'd run out of plays. So toward into the overtime, they kind of had to expand on some things, and then they went into the Central Florida game in the Fiesta Bowl and went more spread, and Joe Burrow had a heck of a game, and I think that catapulted him into this season. And that's when they started to really realize that that's the offensive direction they wanted to go. Ohio State is now in the heart of its conference schedule. I mean, they played against Penn State pretty tightly for most of that game, and they'll have Michigan coming up, and we'll really have a full understanding of just how complete a team Ohio State is. I think you can think of former teams like USC where they were just blowing out everybody in their conference just because they were proving to everybody that they were head and shoulders above everyone else, and I think that's what Ohio State was doing for most part up until the Penn State game. Nobody was within 21 points of them. I think Clemson's kind of doing the same thing since their close call with North Carolina, but I think for sure seeing how Ohio State does against Michigan and in their Big Ten championship game, you can start to have more an apples to apples comparison with LSU, and I do believe it is a close call. He hasn't really mentioned the Heisman as much. I think he understands how good they are as an offense, and that's kind of the terms he puts it. If you ask him any questions about that kind of stuff on Saturday, he did mention that some of the offensive records that they had may never be broken again, and I think that's a sense of what they've been able to accomplish offensively. And there've been questions about that the past couple of weeks. Ever since they beat Alabama, he's been the clear front runner. And someone asked Ed Ogeron today about whether he thought he would win the Heisman, and Ed Ogeron said that in his heart he thinks that he's the best quarterback in the nation, best player in the nation. So whoever they play in that first round is going to be tough. Down the line, I think that it really doesn't matter as much as we try and make it so.
Welcome back. Let's continue more phone calls at 855-2427-285. And let's check out Ren in Alabama. Hey, Ren.
Hello, Mr. Paul.
Hey there.
How are you doing today?
We're doing great. Thank you for calling.
You're welcome. So I would like to know, what's your opinion on Gus Malzahn's job status if Auburn loses the Iron Bowl?
I think it could be pretty shaky. I'm heading down there in a couple of days, and maybe we'll have a better understanding. But the question is, would he want to leave, or will they want him to leave? It's hard to answer that until after the game.
Yeah, I'll be down there too. I've heard some rumors about him maybe going to Arkansas.
Well, I don't really know anybody that knows anything about that other than the fact that they tried to hire him 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping he leaves. Praying.
Okay. Well, say a little prayer for everyone's health. Mike is up next in Macon. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for taking my call. Paul, I want to tell you how much I enjoy listening to you and Stephen A. in the mornings when you're up there in New York. Y'all seem to have like a really just unique and close friendship, and I just love to hear you two go back and forth. It's really entertaining, and and it's good information. And I know Stephen A. can be polarizing, but to me, I don't agree with him a lot of the times. But he's like a national treasure. I mean, he's like Howard Cosell. I mean, he's absolutely the most compelling, voice in the room whenever he's in the room. I don't know. Like I said, he's just a national treasure. I love listening to him.
Mike, listen, I have known him a couple of years, and especially the last 2 or 3 years. I spend time with. I mean, listen. It's not like you can spend a lot of time with Stephen A. He's got a lot going on, but we get together during his lunch break a lot of times up here and just talk. And well, let me say this quietly: we get together and I listen. Okay.
Okay.
And he's a fascinating guy, and I feel like we've really become close friends. And when we're on the air, we're just having fun. It's like two brothers at the Thanksgiving table, just going back and forth. And my goal is always just to make him laugh. And today I had him laughing a couple of times during our segment, and that's my goal, because you're never going to out argue or out debate him. He's the best I've ever seen.
Well, that's true. When you're sitting on the couch early in the morning listening to you guys, talk, it brings a lot of laughter and entertainment. So it's,
he's a misunderstood guy, Mike. And listen, despite the fact that there were reports that he's going to make about $10 million a year, he works harder than anyone I know. He prepares harder than anyone I know. He doesn't take time off. He goes from game to game, to show, and I really admire that work ethic, because sometimes when you make it, the hardest thing to do is to follow that up, and I think he is one of those rare. By the way, Greenberg is very similar. I mean, Greenberg is as good a host as I've ever been around, and I study hosts, being a host. I mean, these two guys are extremely unique.
Well, Stephen A., one thing I know for him for sure, he's a capitalist. He's definitely not a socialist, and I like that.
No,
I'm not going to get pulled.
And listen, I study these things out of curiosity, and I had a pretty good seat to his negotiation. Being privy to his point of view, and certainly understanding everyone else's point of view, and it has not been officially announced yet that he's re-signed, although it's been reported for weeks. And it's a deal that no one in sports broadcasting has ever seen before. It's amazing.
Well, he deserves it. I'm glad for him, and hopefully everything works out great. Paul, moving on to football, just real quick. It's Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Iron Bowl week. The strongest call I've heard for Alabama today is from Mary from Birmingham, and it was a nice call. But, I listened to Legend. Legend's hot take is that the officials deserve the Heisman Trophy. I mean, come on. I mean, that's your hot take during Iron Bowl week. Larry from Shelby, he needs antidepressants to be able to make it through the week. Jerome has disappeared somewhere down there in downtown Birmingham with Bobby. So, I mean, what's going on with the Alabama fans, Paul?
Well, Alabama fans are used to being in the position of up front. And I believe, Mike, it was a shock to the system to lose to LSU and to clearly be outclassed, and then to lose your leader within 7 days of that. So right now, listen, I know what's at stake Saturday, and there's a lot more at stake than just a berth in the playoffs. And I'll save my firepower because it's a holiday and I don't want to ruin anyone's day.
Okay, well, I'm not going to ask your opinion about the game. I know you'll give that, come Saturday. You never do those games before.
Well, I can tell you this, Mike. I don't have a very strong opinion on the game. I'll make it clear.
Okay. If I could ask you for an opinion, if you care to give it and you got time, it's on the Ohio State Michigan game, and I know these things change over the whole season. You've probably heard things today that have influenced you about that game. As you sit right now, what you've heard today, what you've accumulated through the season, how are you looking at that game this weekend?
I like Michigan.
You like Michigan? Okay.
And some of it has to do with just emotion. Michigan has been pointing to this game for a year. Ohio State just got over its toughest game of the year, and you've seen it before. It's hard to pick up after winning that Penn State game and get on the train and go right back to work and go to Ann Arbor. I just think this is a game that is just more important this year to Michigan than to Ohio State.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to get too long. I will say one thing about Ohio State. This team reminds me so much of that 2006 team that went to Arizona to face the Gators, and they were so heavily favored.
Right.
They were supposed to just wreak havoc. And the Gators came out, and after that initial touchdown by Ohio State, the Gators just dismantled them.
Oh, I remember
that's what
that.
I'm feeling this year. Yeah, I may be wrong, but anyway.
Yeah,
Paul,
listen,
thanks for all the time.
I got burned last year pulling for Harbaugh, but I'm pretty solidly Big Blue this weekend. Quick break, more to come. Bill Hancock shortly. That's a good question. I mean, you never see me from the waist down, but I'm locked in here. I'm not. If I dare criticize someone like that, I can't get out of here.
I don't really see how you could say that Alabama is out of this thing.
Is it just about Alabama winning this game?
I certainly think that a blowout loss would help their case, but I still believe that Alabama could get in, and the playoff predictor definitely thinks Alabama could get in, even with a sort of close loss at Auburn.
We live in a hot take universe, Mike, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I have buried and given Jim Harbaugh last rites about 10 times, and I'll do it again Saturday if they lose. The Ohio State-Michigan game really doesn't matter, especially if Ohio State loses. Was I right in making that point?
You were right, as long as Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan and then lose again.
You got to admit the biggest fear I've got is the odds are in Michigan's favor. They're due, if nothing else. I mean, you could only beat the same team how many straight times? You know what I'm saying?
Pat Dooley, are you not buying the resurgence of Tennessee football? I mean, come on.
Well, look, I used to call them the Kardashians, right? Because they looked good, but they never did anything. Then I started calling them Uncle Rico because they always want to go back to the past. They're always out in the field throwing the ball, for the camera.
I don't know what these media members are drinking, but it's definitely spiked with haterade.
I don't think anybody realistically thinks the SEC's going to get 3.
Well, that's why I don't know why Bama fans are all bent out of shape about comparing their resume to Utah.
They're just doing it to do it. I mean, listen, what else are they going to do right now?
I guess not make travel plans to Atlanta. That's for darn sure.
On Thanksgiving Eve, we're expecting a call here shortly from Bill Hancock, who is the executive director of the CFP. He is a regular here on the Wednesday after. We'll join him in just a minute. Mason I tell you what, let me we'll just wait here for a second. I think Bill is about to join us, so we'll hold off on any other calls. Of course, all of you know by now that the new rankings are out, and there's a new number 1 team in the land, and of course it is Ohio State. I think we're ready to go with Bill, so let's welcome Bill into the program. Bill, good afternoon. Happy Thanksgiving, and really appreciate you coming on.
Good afternoon, Paul, and happy Thanksgiving to you and to all the listeners.
By the way, you remind me, and I feel like I know you well enough to ask. Is there a tradition around the Hancock House on Thanksgiving?
Oh man, a lot of family here. It's my favorite holiday. I love the parade. I love the eating. We have the Turkey Bowl, about the 30th annual Turkey Bowl touch game on Friday.
Well, that's
my
great.
My goal for Thanksgiving weekend is to not get injured.
Well, Bill, I know you're quite a runner, so I think you ought to be in probably pretty decent shape.
Well, if I could have a 26-mile pass pattern, I could be open every time.
No doubt. Yeah, I've always loved the day before Thanksgiving. I'm in New York today, as I am every Wednesday, and just walking around, it's a combination of Thanksgiving, Christmas. Everyone is seemingly off and in a great mood and in no big hurry to go anywhere.
Well, I love New York, and especially at holiday time. So I'm right with you on that.
Well, let's get to last night. We love breaking news, and we had it. The new number 1. So take us inside the room and tell us how the committee arrived on the Buckeyes.
Well, Ohio State and LSU, as you know well, are 2 excellent football teams. And I think the committee just felt like Ohio State was a more complete team on both sides of the ball. And everyone needs to remember that every team's resume changes every week. And Ohio State's resume was improved with that victory over Penn State. So the committee just felt like Ohio State belonged at number 1.
Was there any one thing in particular other than the Penn State win?
Just the whole resume and how much it did improve with the victory over Penn State. And I think the committee feels like, I think a lot of observers, maybe including you, feel like Ohio State's defense may be a little stronger to this point. But those are 2 really, really good football teams.
Yeah, I do agree. Listen, I don't always agree, but I do agree this time. And by the way, my vote does not count, even though I'm going to lobby for a media vote next year because I know that it would be well thought out. Let me get to the 4 and 5 position. Was there any conversation that you can tell us, and maybe you can't, between the Georgia spot at 4 and Alabama at 5? And I bring that up only because we all know the South Carolina comparison. We also know Alabama lost to LSU. We know the resume, but was that ever a consideration to move Alabama up?
Well, the committee talks about every spot in the rankings when they go through that 7-step process to put the teams in. And this time, like last time also, Georgia's 3 wins, Auburn, Florida, and Notre Dame, were what pushed them into number 4 again this time. And I think coincidentally, we're talking again about a team that has probably a superior defense. What have they thrown? 3 shutouts, I believe, this year, and I think only one rushing TD. And I have to say this again: those Georgia and Alabama are 2 very good football teams, but that's what pushed Georgia into 4 again this week.
Listen, I hate to be the guy that always tells you what's said, especially when it's on national television, because I don't expect you to consume every bit. But I'm on with Greenberg today and Ryan Clark and Desmond Howard, and we're having the typical reaction. And Greenberg just went all in on the committee moving Ohio State up. His word was a joke. Ryan Clark and Desmond Howard seemed to by the way, I'm not quoting Brando this week. I'm quoting other people. The other two just...
Hey, Paul, every time you say Brando to me, it makes me laugh.
Well, you're thinking it's Marlon Brando, right?
Bingo.
I am, and the other two were. I mean, they really do believe that this is all a setup to prevent, in the event Alabama gets in, an Alabama LSU rematch. Now, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but is there any way to combat? And that includes me, all the various things that are said. And by the way, they're said and disseminated to a lot of people who may or may not believe them.
Well, first of all, remember how much we love the passion of college football. And everyone has an opinion, and I treasure every opinion that I hear. But if you remember our conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago when you asked me about the comment by Stephen A., and when I just said, that's just wrong, and please tell him that. I respect him, but he's wrong. Well, that's my same comment on what you just said. That's just wrong. The committee, all they have to do is rank the top 4, and there's no other considerations. And that's what they do. They don't try to set up any kind of matches in the semifinals. Just rank the top 4, and where they fall out is where they fall out.
Well, glad to clear that up because it certainly was bugging me sitting there that I couldn't immediately call you and have you join in on the conversation. The final question I think everyone is curious about, Bill, and I realize there are 2 weeks left, but people are wondering about the 4 spot, and there are a lot of variables, but those of us in the media are trying to make it an Alabama, Utah, Oklahoma conversation. I know you can't do that, but we are. How do those 3 match up, at least up until now, with an incomplete resume?
Well, you have to know, and I know you do know, that the committee doesn't project ahead. They just base the rankings on what's happened to date. So I can't speculate. Neither you nor I know what's going to happen in the games this weekend, and certainly not next weekend. The committee has those teams lined up the way they feel they belong this week, but the resume is incomplete, as you said. And I think everybody needs to keep in mind the tiebreakers. When the teams are viewed as comparable, then those 4 tiebreakers kick in. As you know, conference championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head results, and common opponents without any weighting. It's up to each committee member to wait. WEIGHT, and we all have to WAIT to see what's going to happen. No one can predict, and I love hearing all the talk about it, and it's a lot of fun for everybody. But we all just have to wait and see what happens on the field.
Okay, let me go back to one more because I'm really having fun quoting various people to you, and I know you have fun with it as well. But I want to go back to my colleague Mike Greenberg, and I'm going to read you something that not only he tweeted, but he said it on the air. He gave a commentary where he used the word joke, but in his tweet he said this: if LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship, they will be the first team in almost 80 years to beat 5 top 10 teams in a season. That they aren't number one in the country is positively outrageous. Now, I realize he's going ahead a little bit, but he's also talking about what he saw last night. Is there any way to respond to that?
Oh, I try to make it a practice not to respond to what I read and hear, but I think the rankings stand for themselves. The committee, just as I said, felt like Ohio State was the more complete team this week, but again, with 2 more weeks to go.
Finally, the question I've had a few times today up here in the media center of the world: why does the committee release the rankings when they do, considering it is confusing? Some people think it's convoluted. Some people just will never understand this, because you have people, Bill, as you well know, talking about college football and the CFP that really don't swim in these waters very much, very long, and they show up on whatever date the first rankings come out. They haven't gone through a mock. They haven't really gone through this exercise that we go through every week. Is there a way to answer this other than to indicate that it's just done to create interest?
Well, that's not the primary reason. It does extend the college football weekend out through Tuesday night, which is not a bad thing. But we thought when we set this up, we thought we don't want people to believe that the other polls and other rankings are the end-all, be-all. We wanted the committee to be able to step up and say, "Hey, wait, this is ours. This is what we're thinking. So don't put too much in those others." And we don't start until week 10 because we want to wait and see. We want enough games to have been played so that the committee can make a reasonable decision. I like the fact that the committee gets together for 5 weeks before selection weekend. It enhances the committee's knowledge of all the teams. By the time we get to selection weekend, they have debated every single aspect of every game. And I think that's healthy. I think that experience in debating the teams by the time we get to the end is healthy. So those are some of the reasons why we do it the way we do, and I feel like it's the right thing to do. And I love, as we talked earlier, I'd love to hear what people think about what the committee's done, and I'd love to be able to give you something to talk about on the air, for crying out loud.
Well, Bill, listen, I don't thank you enough, but I do appreciate it, because we have a lot of time here that we deal with, and this is topic number 1 for about 6 weeks. So I don't know where we would be today without you.
Oh, you'd be in New York City having a great time. I hope you get to go to the theater tonight too, and I wish I could be with you.
Well, thank you, Bill. I did see To Kill a Mockingbird a few weeks ago, and it was I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet, but I'm sure you have. It's quite extraordinary.
Oh, I love the book. I just love the book. I love Atticus Finch and Scout and Jim and all of them. So I'm with you. And let me just say again, happy Thanksgiving to you and to all the listeners who really make this engine of college football go. Without all those listeners, you wouldn't have a job, and neither would I.
You're absolutely right, and I need it right now pretty desperately, Bill. Thanks anyway. Thanks for being on. Happy Thanksgiving to your family, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Paul. Take care. Bye.
Great stuff. Bill Hancock joining us right here on the program. We'll take a short break.
Florida State's probably going to get a new coach next week. They're going to start over. But for Florida, it means getting to 10 wins, which was one more win you had the regular season.
last year, and it means you're showing progress, and it also means you're going to get to a nicer bowl. But it also allows you. Let's face it. I mean, Paul, well, you saw the Miami game Saturday, and Miami and FSU are both in the toilet right now. Why not keep your foot on their throat, and win this game, win the state championship, and say, hey, there's only one team that's recruiting-wise. There's only one team that's been in New Year's Six bowls. The other ones are hoping to get to Shreveport or whatever. So that makes it a huge game for Florida and for these seniors as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it just seems not much has gone right in that state. I'm interested, Pat, beyond this game, because I think we all know what's going to happen. Just your thoughts on the Gator season, because I mean, all these college football playoff conversations, and I tried to explain to somebody up here today, I think it was Stephen A. Smith. I said, hey, I was talking about Auburn and saying this is really a good team. I mean, they lost at Florida. He looked at me like okay, what does that mean? And I explained Florida's resume, and it just doesn't seem like anyone wants to listen that the Gators probably, with somebody else's schedule, would be in great shape right now.
First of all, why were you discussing college football with Stephen A. Smith? Okay,
that's a good question.
That's the A part of that. The B part of it is, it has been a nice season. It has been a fun season in a lot of ways. But again, when you lose to Georgia and don't win the East, it's not a great season. On the other hand, when Jim McElwain won the East, it wasn't a great season because they always lost to FSU at the end of the year and then got, boat raced by Alabama. So, I think this has been a really nice another step, and I want to say a baby step. Last year was a big stride in getting things where they wanted to get them, and now they've taken another nice step. They need to finish it off by beating FSU to get to 10 wins. But look who they've lost to. They've lost to LSU and Georgia, who are 1-4.
We welcome you back. Let's get some reaction to what Bill had to say, and Randy is up next. Hey, Randy, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much.
I saw you on Stephen A. this morning. I'm sure you caught a lot of flack for agreeing with him on the rankings. But anyway, number one, I heard Desmond Howard a little bit ago trying to compare LSU's win over 128th ranked Arkansas was as good a win as the Buckeyes beating the number 8 Penn State. I mean, are you really kidding me there?
I thought that was a ridiculous comment.
Yeah, it might have been the dumbest thing I've heard in a long, long time. But one other thing, I've never heard anything about Ryan Day being considered for Coach of the Year. Here's a guy who's got 14 starts and 14 wins as a head coach. I think Ohio State's going to run the table. He'll be 18-0 as a head coach, but I'm not hearing anything about him getting consideration. I know Ogeron's done a great job, but what was your thinking on that?
Yeah, listen, I must say I haven't given it much thought, but for a first-year coach, it's been phenomenal. And I was asked may have been Stephen A. today, about Ryan Day and the difference. And Urban Meyer did leave him a very good team, but this team also, at least going into the Michigan game, has not pulled one of those road disasters which we saw last year at Purdue and the year before at Iowa that Urban was famous for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one other thing I never got to talk to you about. You just really destroyed Ohio State as far as losing to a 6-6 Purdue team, but you don't seem to have a problem with Georgia losing to a 4-8 team.
Well, listen, I wasn't overly impressed, but I felt Georgia would come back, and the difference is Georgia had a resume, I think, that got them back, but.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not over yet. Georgia doesn't beat LSU, it's really not going to make one bit of difference.
Well, there's one other thing I wanted to comment on. there's three aspects to football. There's offense, defense, and special teams. The Buckeyes got a field goal kicker that's made a 49-yarder and a 55-yard field goal, while LSU's kicker is missing extra points now. That could be crucial down the road, you know what I'm saying, in a close game.
Listen, special teams are always important. I watched an NFL game the other day, I think the Panthers and the Saints, where the guy missed a 30-yard field goal to put the Panthers ahead of the Saints in New Orleans with 2 minutes to go. I mean, he had missed an extra point. I've never seen such bad kicking in the NFL, and I'm used to it in college, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell Desmond maybe he ought to go see a doctor, because I think maybe he took one too many shots to the head.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to jump in there because it took me a while to digest what he said about Arkansas. Hey, thanks for the call. Cam in Charleston, you are next up. Hey, Cam.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, man?
We are doing great. Good to have you on.
Hey, man. Good to be here. So had a couple things. So Clemson alum, of course. I just took a slight issue with when you were talking about our schedule, saying, that, you had 5 teams out there that could come in there and run the table, as Clemson's already done. The only problem with that is, most of those teams were beat by Georgia. Georgia got beat by South Carolina, who we play this week, 4-7. I think you might be breathing too much of the New York air up there, Paul. That's all I'm saying.
Cam, I hate to break this to you. There is no air up in here in New York.
If you're closed in, that's true. You can't see the people out there. I mean, before you know, you become a socialist.
The weird thing it was 60 degrees yesterday, and I took a walk at lunch, and I said to myself, this is going to be a beautiful day with the sun out, but you don't have air, nor do you have sun, because there's so many buildings. You're always in the shade. So, hey, thanks for the call. Great to have you on. Billy is in Cleveland. You're on the air. Hello, Billy.
How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you.
Happy to hear that. All right, so I just want to talk how OSU football, they're just ridiculous this year, and it is unbelievably annoying to watch for me, considering I'm a Notre Dame fan from Cleveland, and I just get ripped apart for how bad Notre Dame is compared to OSU.
Well, listen, Notre Dame's a good team. They're just not a great team.
Yeah, that's the issue. We don't have a coach that can separate ourselves. They got Ryan Day. They just restacked themselves, and we hold on to Brian Kelly.
Well, listen, I've always felt Brian Kelly has reached a ceiling. It's not a bad ceiling. Notre Dame is an important team, but they're not in Ohio State's league, and certainly they're not in. They proved last year they don't belong among the elite. Red Dog is up next.
Does every Clemson fan have little man syndrome, or is it just me? I mean, the guy calls you, Paul, and starts talking about who they've beaten. Clemson doesn't beat anybody. I mean, they never beat anybody. So, and, he's got his own ACC network. Tell him to call in there. I mean, they have Clemson fans. I mean, it's like they've won 2 national championships, but they have to call into the Paul Finebaum show on the SEC network and validate themselves. I mean, if it was up to me, Clemson and Georgia Tech would be both in the SEC East, and Georgia would whip them every year, if it was up to me. But Georgia Tech, they're the ones that left the ACC. We didn't leave the SEC, and that was way before my time, but I know my history. But, Paul, have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much, Red Dog. I appreciate it. So let's move along. Mike is in Georgia. Hey, Mike, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for taking my call, man.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm a first-time caller and a big Bulldog fan. And not many people, other than the ones right around here, are giving Georgia much of a chance against LSU. Just quick minute. Just give me how we can beat them and your thoughts on that game, Paul.
Okay, sure. Oh, you're asking me? I think Georgia's defense is good enough to keep them in any game. And I think when Jake Fromm is on, he can be a serviceable quarterback. And when I say serviceable, I don't mean that as a shot. I mean that as a quarterback that can get Georgia enough points. Now, I think the real question is can Georgia's defense slow Joe Burrow down enough? The only thing I can offer for a case in point is Auburn's defense. They're similar. You could argue Georgia's is better, and Auburn only gave up 23 points to LSU.
That's very true, and that's kind of what the fans around here are banking on, and it would really shake up the polls if Georgia did win that game. Where do you think LSU would go?
My guess is third or fourth, and I mean I think they would. Even though they say they wouldn't, I think they would try to avoid a rematch of a game we just got through watching. So they would probably put 1-4 and 1-3.
That's what I was thinking too. Well, that's all I had, Paul. Don't want to take up much more of your time. Just thanks for taking my call.
Thank you. Yeah, the one interesting thing, if it turned out that Georgia and LSU played each other again, which don't think that's going to happen. The game would not be in Atlanta, even though the two playoff games are in Atlanta and Phoenix, because it would give Georgia an advantage over a higher-ranked opponent. So it would be hilarious if Georgia and LSU play each other and the game is in Arizona, while Clemson and presumably Ohio State were to play in Atlanta. We're up against a break. More to come. 90 minutes to go. We have had a good time. See more guests to come on the program. Stick around. Here comes Lynn Bowden to save the day, the speedy wide receiver, taking on additional responsibilities and has been quite good. Thank you. Lynn joins us now. Thanks for coming back. I mean, I find your story to be one of the most amazing of the year, and I know you don't want to get hung up on what you've accomplished. You've just your next man up. But talk about your odyssey this year as the quarterback of the Wildcats.
I appreciate you guys for having me back on. You know, this year it's just we had a lot of ups and downs. You know, we were really just searching for our identity. You know, how we was going to define ourselves, and you know, I'm the type of guy I want to step in and do what's best for the team, and I think the team bought into that, and we just never looked back from there.
It's not easy being a student athlete. It's especially difficult when you have a tricky position like wide receiver. But how much more have you had to study and work and look at film now that you are the team's quarterback?
I had to dedicate most of my day to learning the different things. You know, it's way different from high school to college. You know, high school, my line, we went big on big. So when I first got in there, I had to learn Rip and Liz, Lester Ralph, the protections just from the line standpoint and where I'm hot off of. So I had to spend most of my days in there with Coach Henshaw.
In many ways, carrying this team on your back, even though I know you're not going to admit that, but a lot of people see it that way. What do you think your takeaway will be from the 19 season?
See, I'm the type of guy I don't really like to talk about myself, but I mean, if you must know, about me, I found out about myself that I got a lot of heart, you know, just within, and I'm very passionate about everything I do. You know, I'm a winner. I hate to lose. You know, I love to win, and I just love the game. So like, I just want people to understand, like, it's bigger than me. Like, that's why I stepped up to the role for this team. You know, I wanted to be the best I can and be in the best situation that we can be in at the University of Kentucky.
Welcome back. Glad you're here. And more calls as we are really having a good time here on Thanksgiving Eve. Let's try to roll some more calls here. David is in Florida. Hello, David.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, sir?
We're doing well. Thank you.
Listen, I got a two-part question. One has to do with Nick Saban. He's kind of double talk when it comes to him kind of politicking for his team to make it into the CFP this year. I remember last year when Georgia, almost beat him in the SEC championship game, and afterwards Saban says, I don't want to play them again. But then he turned around and said, oh, well, they don't deserve to be in the college football playoff. And, well, this year, how can he make a claim for his team when his star quarterback is down, and the college football playoff committee definitely takes that into consideration? And, I just don't see how he can claim that. I mean, it's not like, the LSU year where they played each other twice because they went into double overtime. And the second part is, boy, I really wish Georgia had all those receivers and won the NFL last year, because we'd probably give LSU a better game.
I think you're right about that. Hey, great to hear from you, David. Thank you very, very much. Let's check in with with Frida, who is up next. Hello, Frida.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Good afternoon. I have what may seem like a bizarre question, but I'm very interested in sort of the psychology of such a high-pressure week for these young men that play ball literally all over the place, certainly in the SEC. And my question is, are you familiar with, or are there social media policies for these young men? I mean, do coaches use them strategically if the boys are slaughtered in something on Facebook or other social media? Just curious if you know if there are policies.
Frida, I do. I know a little bit. I mean, there are people on every coaching staff. Listen, there are pretty much people on every. I mean, I can assure you, I don't tweet anything without my bosses reading it. I don't mean that I run it by them. I mean that they will know. They will see it. Certain schools, like Clemson, I know is one that Dabo Swinney does not allow his players to tweet. I think it's during the season. Other coaches have different policies. I'm not crazy about that, because you and I both know that young people live on social media. It's a much more important part of their lives than maybe it is to people older, and that's how they exist. That's how they communicate.
That's right. Well, I appreciate it. I just was curious because I've seen some way not very kind things that folks have said this past season about my quarterback. And, I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. Let's, on this Thanksgiving Eve, let's head to South Carolina.
Greetings
Kat.
and salutations, Mr. Paul.
What's up, Kat?
I wish you a very happy Turkey Day tomorrow, you and your family and all the boys and girls up there at your studio that work on your show. I hope
Thank
all
you.
folks out there listening have them a great Thanksgiving, and don't forget, you can't have Thanksgiving without oyster dressing and palmetto moonshine.
Oh, there's no question, Palmetto. I'm having a sip of Palmetto right now. I had some delivered to my hotel last night.
Good for you, Mr. Finebaum. I'll tell you what, one year I marinated my turkey in palmetto moonshine, did it overnight, and decided I was going to deep fry my turkey. Big mistake. Columbia Fire Department was out there for 2 hours trying to put that thing out. Anyway, can I make a bold prediction?
Okay.
I predict that South Carolina will ruin Clemson's season in an upset that will shock the world.
Oh, my goodness. Now we're talking, my friend.
Yes, sir. I'm getting back into the mode. We're going to be up there Saturday, and we are going to end their season, and Dabo, we're going back to Clemson crying.
You know how I hope the game ends?
How?
On a touchdown by Clemson that is called back for holding.
Oh, Lord. You worse than Junior.
And by the way, I hope it's the wrong call, too.
Yeah, that's cold, Mr. Firebaum. That's cold, but I love it. You have a great Thanksgiving now.
Thank you, my friend. Always great to hear from you. Let's continue. Craig is up next. Hello, Craig. Good afternoon.
Happy Thanksgiving Eve, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Do they serve chicken and dressing in New York City?
Only on a bagel.
Only on a bagel. Well, anyway, I like the way you think. As soon as the committee rankings come out, I called a friend of mine and I said, "Did you see what they just did?" And he says, "No, what'd they do?" I said, "They flip-flopped LSU and Ohio State because they're planning on Alabama winning out and don't want an LSU-Alabama rematch that quick."
Well, first of all, it really would be unfair to LSU to have to beat Alabama again in the first game. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to give them as much credit as maybe we give them. But if you listen to Hancock a few minutes ago, it doesn't sound like he's too concerned about all the speculation.
No, he's not. But I called today, Cam. I called to give Clemson a little love. We haven't heard much out of them since the first of the year. I've got some wild dogs here. And,
it's okay.
Mercy. My Bulldogs are going crazy.
Sounds like a bunch of Georgia fans.
Anyway, if everybody in the top 10 had played Clemson's schedule this year, wouldn't we be in a mess right now?
Yeah, because I can't think of one team in the top 10 that would be undefeated. That wouldn't be undefeated.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I wanted to share today. And tell Cam he might need to get a little air before his head explodes.
I will. Hey, thank you very much, Craig. Good to have you on. Robert is up next. Hey, Robert.
Hey, what's going on, Paul?
Hey there.
Paul, I wanted to take up from my man Desmond, because y'all called him an idiot, a statement this morning. The only thing Desmond was doing was comparing the 2 weeks, the week prior, when LSU gave up all those yards against Ole Miss, and Ohio State blew the team out. You should have moved them then if you were going to move them. Don't wait till they struggle, and LSU beat Arkansas by 30-some points, and you move them this week. That's what Dez was saying.
That's a fair point. I hear what you're saying there.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't understand it, but to me, I feel like Alabama's going to slide in. That's why they moved it. They went on and did it this week. Don't wait because, they won't have an excuse. One other thing I would like to say, Paul, I know you guys have been high on Kirby and saying Kirby's going to be the next guy to dethrone Nick, and no one ever thought Ed Orgeron would be that guy. But it's possible to be the one to do it. I think Ed is in the picture now. He could be the guy to dethrone Nick Saban in the future.
I tell you what, if they were to meet if they were to meet in the playoffs and he beat him again, can you imagine?
I know, and that'll be 2 wins in 1 year, and man, that's something nobody thought about a year ago. Most people thought Ed would be out on the streets right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, there was plenty of reason to think that.
Yeah, but based on Ole Miss, that's the only thing people can come up with. Now, he did a great job at USC, I think, and he probably should have got that job. But, hey, the schools that got all the coaches that they wanted right now, I bet they wish they had Coach O, USC and Texas. That's all I got, Paul.
Hey, you had a great call. Thank you for the call. We are heading to a break. Still more to come. We're thankful. We're thankful that you've joined us here on this Thanksgiving Eve. I know a lot is going on out there if you're on the road.
The Iron Bowl is, one of the great rivalries in college football. If you're a competitor, you love to play in games like this game this week and playing against a really good team. And, maybe as it should be, a lot comes down to this game. It's kind of a season within a season, so to speak. And I think if you have to explain that to your team or your players, they don't really know what's going on in football. So I think the key to the drill is great preparation, great practice, really doing a good job of preparing in the game, because we've seen all year long that, when we do that, we play well. When we don't do as well. Injuries for our team, a couple guys, Ruggs and Phil Mathis will start back to practice today and still be evaluated day to day. Raekwon is still day to day, and Will Reichert is still out as far as this game is concerned. I think Auburn has an outstanding team. They have some very impressive wins over top 10 teams, top 20 teams. The only teams they've lost to is, some teams that were ranked in the top 10. So they've been very competitive and played really well, in all those games. I think their defense is, one of the best defensive teams in the country, probably anchored by, two really good players up front. Derek Brown and Marlon, are both really, really good players and have been difficult for people to block all season long, but they play great team defense. They play with a lot of toughness. So this is going to be a real challenge, for us. Offensively, they've been very effective creating balance. I think Bo Nix has done a really good job of doing that for them. They're very effective running the football. They've got really good skill guys outside. They've got a really good runner. Whitlow's a really good runner. So this team is very good on special teams. So, this is, the best team we've played probably so far this year, and it'll be the most challenging place that we've played. So, real challenge for our players and our team.
We are back. Glad you are too. Let's get some calls, and Squirrel is up next. How you doing, Squirrel?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you taking my call. Are you going to be spending Thanksgiving in the Big Apple, or are you going to be heading home tonight?
No, I'm out of here early in the morning, going home for the day, and then heading off to Auburn Friday morning.
Sweet. Well, I hope you have safe travels there. But no, I
Thank you.
really enjoy you having Hancock on every week, and I really enjoy his perspective. And I've been getting a lot of grief from the Bama haters in this part of the country, where there's millions of them, as you know, and they're trying to make the case for Utah and how they deserve to be in, or Oklahoma, how they should be in or deserve. But I keep reminding them that the committee's job is to get the 4 best teams, not the ones that maybe should or ought to or things of that nature. And then didn't he say a week or two ago that there's a pretty good gap between the 5th place team and the rest of the field?
I believe he did, yes.
Yeah, he did say that. So, Utah is not on their heels as quick as as close as people think they are. And another thing I try to point out is, and I don't expect you to be a draft guru, but if you had to estimate, Paul, how many players do you think will get drafted off the Utah team this year?
2 or 3.
Just ballpark. Okay, how many, just ballpark, do you think might get drafted off the Bama team this year?
Double digits.
Yeah, and there's no better judge of talent than the NFL. That tells you who the best team is right there between Alabama and Utah. I mean, boom, case closed as far as I'm concerned. But I appreciate you taking my call. Hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving holiday, and aloha.
Thank you very much. It is great to have you on. Let's continue with more. Dylan is in Mississippi. Hello, Dylan.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, we're doing great. Thank you.
I was trying to see if I could get your take on Joe Moorhead's future if he loses tomorrow.
I don't think he has one if he loses tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't hate the guy. I'm saying I just know, Morrow being biggest game, we don't go bowl eligible. We don't beat, our biggest rival. I feel like they probably kind of kick him to the curb if he loses tomorrow.
Yeah, listen, you don't know what's behind the scenes, but I think if Joe Moorhead loses the game tomorrow, he gets called in to John Cohn's office Friday morning, and Cohn would probably do what I would do and say, listen, can you give me an argument, a reason for us to keep you? I would really like to know what Moorhead says.
Yeah, me too. I'm saying I don't hate the guy, but he definitely isn't living up to the standard as we'd want.
By the way, I don't mean to be snippety here, but I'm not really sure he has much of an argument either way.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't think he's a great coach, but I wish he could be a little better coach.
Well, listen, I think everyone was hoping for that. It hasn't worked out very well. Thank you for the call. Kirk is calling next. Hey, Kirk.
Hi, how are you?
I am well, thank you.
What are the chances someone other than an SEC team comes in at number 4 in the college football playoff, assuming LSU finishes undefeated?
It's possible. Listen. There's a Big Ten component that has not been considered very often. If Minnesota were to beat an undefeated Ohio State team.
Yeah, I was thinking about that option as well. I mean, it seems to be a little bit of a lean toward Alabama and or Georgia being the number 4 team, and or flip-flopping Georgia and LSU. But I was just curious about any other.
Yeah, I think that's the best. I think the Big Ten would have a better argument than the Big 12 or the Pac-12. Hey, thanks for the call. We have an hour to go. We hope you will stick around.
That was, one of the purposes of that story is to call people, experts in the not just college football, but the NFL, and try to get them to explain it to you. How did this happen? And obviously talking to people around LSU, how did this happen? And I think it's a bunch of factors, but really, I think the main one, Paul, is the guy has had this talent for a while, was beat out by very, very good players at Ohio State. I mean, look who he was behind, at Ohio State, J.T. Barrett and Dwayne Haskins. And, Burrow, his second year at Ohio State, broke his thumb during the competition to be the backup with Dwayne Haskins, and that kind of put him behind. And it put him behind the next year in the battle with Dwayne Haskins. And in Urban Meyer, I think, I don't know if this made the story or not, but Urban Meyer told Jimmy Burrow, Joe's dad, your son and Dwayne Haskins are virtually equal. He could win the job over the summer. But they didn't want to take that risk, and they kind of felt like still Dwayne was slightly ahead. So they decided to transfer. And, so getting back to the point of how this happened, I think he's always had the talent. I think it's always been there. LSU now has an offense, Paul, that's able to show it off. And as one LSU staff member put it really well is, last year's offense with Joe Burrow last year, we were asking him to play Uno when he's a chess master. And now he's playing a little chess, and we're seeing he's very good at it. I think what it came down to is playing in big games. He wanted to play in big games, and he saw the opportunity there that they could play in big games. And you got to give Coach O some credit, right? The guy is a heck of a recruiter. Danny Burrow, Joe's brother, told me a story. He went on that visit to LSU where they wined and dined the family, took them out for crawfish and had these long X's and O's meetings and all this stuff. And Danny said at the end, Coach O obviously knew Danny Burrow was a pretty big influencer in Joe's life and decision. So as they were walking out the door to leave, Orgeron took Danny Burrow aside and said, "Here's my cell number. Please keep in touch." And Danny was just blown away. The head coach at LSU just gave me his cell number. And, they talked that week. That was a long week, I think, leading up to the decision. Joe talked with Danny. Danny talked with, I think, Coach O. And I think they settled on he wanted to play big games and wanted the best opportunity, and we thought LSU was it.
It is the week of the Iron Bowl, and who better to get some perspective than Cecil Hurd, who's, covered a couple of Iron Bowls in his career at the Tuscaloosa News. Cecil, thank you. Appreciate you being on. So how many will this mark? Do you keep track, or have you lost track?
I keep track. I'd seen some when I was growing up, so it's not. Those aren't consecutive. But as far as working one capacity or another, this will be 43. 43? Yeah, 76.
Making me feel younger by the day, Cecil. I guess it's a cliche question to ask you. What does this Iron Bowl remind you of, if it reminds you of anything? Because it seems like we've been down this road before with Alabama needing a win against Auburn.
They've been in that situation before, but in some ways, I think it's fairly evenly matched, and it almost reminds me of some of the games when there were big implications, as you know, in the 1980s. Different style of football, different offenses, but the 85 game, the 86 game, when Auburn in particular was competing for SEC championships and on the national picture, but Alabama was particularly in '86 was there as well, and so it's got a little bit of the old time Alabama Auburn, almost the Legion Field feeling to it. It's a big game for Auburn. Obviously, their ramifications for Auburn are a little different than they are for Alabama, at least in terms of Alabama staying alive. A win wouldn't guarantee anything, but it would at least give everybody another week of heated conversation about Alabama and hot news, and get to hear every commentator in America chime in. So that goes away if Alabama can't win. But I think in Tuscaloosa, Paul, and real quickly, just sort of to sum up, I think that after the Clemson game last year, after the LSU game earlier this year, and certainly Tua being out has something to do with it, but even in those games, I think that Alabama fans are wanting to see the Alabama they remember from 3 or 4 years ago, just go out and play clean and not put themselves, in both those games, in their biggest games of 2018 and so thus far of 2019, Alabama's gone haywire in the first half, gotten themselves in a hole that they hadn't been able to get themselves out of. They came closer to doing that against LSU, but that's never been a hallmark of Nick Saban football team. And I think Alabama fans really want to see, a good performance. They understand that it's a different quarterback, but they want to see a good performance, hard physical performance from the defense, and sort of get the idea that the standards are still there and that there hadn't been a sort of a subtle backsliding over those games, and that other teams are catching up. They want to see, in a nutshell, they want to see Alabama play well.
Cecil, you've been to a million Nick Saban press conferences, so I guess I'll ask you the same question that's been asked many, many times since Monday in terms of the meaning behind what Saban was saying when he said Auburn, probably the best team we played.
I think that, first of all, I don't think it was a slight at LSU. I think he's always looking for, it's like he's driving a Ferrari. There's no rearview mirror for him. If who knows what the circumstances would be if they played LSU again in the playoffs, he'd probably say about the same thing about LSU. I would certainly say that Auburn's the best defensive team that they've played. Doesn't have the offense clearly that LSU has, but I think that he's just so focused on the next opponent and the next game, and doesn't, he learns from losing, but I don't know that he focuses on it. So I don't know that he put a lot of thought into that. I don't know if it was any subtle kind of jab. It's just what they've got to get done. And given the atmosphere, given playing in Jordan-Hare Stadium and some of the things that have happened there, and again, given the strength of Auburn's defense, I would say that LSU is the best team that they played, but I understand what Nick's perspective on that is.
In terms of the comparison, and we all know this game will dictate, but assuming Alabama wins, Cecil, you know the personnel. Is it, or how would you compare Alabama with a win over Auburn 2 weeks from now against Oklahoma if it runs the table, Utah if it runs the table?
Well, I'd have to put if they do, in that hypothetical, I think it would be close. I think that there would be, Alabama's only loss would be a 5-point loss to the number 1 or number 2 team, which both Utah, USC's, they're not a bad team. They're a ranked team, but they're certainly not LSU. And Oklahoma has a loss to Kansas State. So if that's what you use to compare, I don't know that either of those teams would have a win that would be glaringly better than a win over Auburn. I don't know where you would rate in that hypothetical, where you would rate beating Baylor twice, which Oklahoma would have had to have done. So I do think, without being long-winded about this, I think that over the past several years we've seen a little bit under the surface, a little sub rosa, but to push the notion that all conferences are equal, and that if a team wins their conference championship, that should be the trump card. That because one conference isn't better than another, they're all the same. Well, that's not true. The second place team in a conference can be much better than the first place team in another given conference. So it's going to be interesting to see how the committee views that. I think this year, I think less so than in the famous Alabama LSU rematch, but I think, or even in 2017 when Alabama got in without winning the conference. And Ohio State's done it too. It's not just something that's reserved for Alabama. But I think there's a real push to have more equal conference representation. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens if Georgia beats LSU. It's going to get to be a really sticky debate. But I think that the committee's been fair to Alabama since there's been a committee, and I'm going to assume that they'll be fair. And that doesn't mean that Alabama will get in, but I think they'll get a fair look. But they're talking points. It's all subjective, Paul. You come down to the question of teams with comparable resumes. A conference champion is supposed to get benefit of the doubt, but what's a comparable resume? And there are some leagues, and I'm not going to – you get enough from other conferences, but, there are some conferences that Alabama could go undefeated in because they wouldn't have to play LSU, or could have gone undefeated in because they didn't have to play LSU. So I'll be interested to see how the committee handles that, but there's certainly been a strong push that conference champions, all the conferences are equal, and conference champions should get in.
Cecil, before you go, tell us about Mac Jones, what you know about him and what your sense is as he faces this challenge.
Yeah, Mac wasn't recruited probably at the level that Tua was, but Mac was an SEC level recruit. He committed to Kentucky and then had the chance to come to Alabama and wanted to do that, knowing that the quarterback competition would be very difficult when he came in, and he's been, a steady backup, and he's got a really good personality. He's very confident. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be able to handle a situation he's never been in before without any problem, but he's not going to be afraid going into Auburn. So he's played as well as you could possibly expect in the games that he's been the starter against Arkansas and Western Carolina. I understand the level of competition that you're talking about. So he'll be confident. I think his teammates have confidence in him. Can he physically do some of the things that Tua did? No. There's really not a college quarterback who can. And so I don't think Nick Saban's been very adamant this week. They're not changing the offense. Some things that Tua improvised or Tua could do won't get done, but they made sure to put some deep balls on film against Western Carolina, and Mac can make those throws. He can do that. So I think he'll be fine with the caveat he's never been in this situation before. We have no information to base that on other than what we saw him do against Arkansas and Western Carolina, which are not by any stretch Auburn.
No, they are not. Oh, Cecil, listen, always great to have you on. Happy Thanksgiving, and look forward to running into you this weekend.
We'll either have lots to talk about next week or nothing at all.
Yeah, no. If Alabama's not in the playoff consideration, I'm not sure what we will be talking about, but it won't be pretty.
I assume the Earth will remain on its axis, but I can't guarantee.
I don't know. I remember many years ago you talked about the Flat Earth Society, and you might have to bring that one back.
It may have to come back. That's possible. So, all right, it's great to talk to you, Paul, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Thanks, Cecil. Always great to have you on. Cecil Hurt, I believe, probably has been the most regular guest on the Finebaum Show if you go back to its inception. We will take a break. More to come.
I know all of our players and our coaches are extremely excited about that. You look at last year's game and first half, I thought we played a good first half. It got away from us in the second half. We're going to have to do a good job of really playing 4 quarters of football come Saturday. When you look at them this year offensively, one of the best in the country, one of the more explosive offenses, if not the most explosive offense. You look at the receivers, they can all take short ones a long way. The running backs are very impressive. Do a good job running, but they also do a good job catching the ball out of the backfield. And then, of course, their offensive line is one of the best in the country. They do have a new quarterback, but the games he's played, he's been efficient. And looks like he has a good grasp of the offense. When you look at their defense, one of the top-ranked defenses in our league again. Real impressed with the guys they have on the back end. They've got very good ball skills and can really run. This will be our 5th top 10 opponent, so the good thing is it won't be a shock to our system, and really hoping that'll be an advantage for us. It'll be senior day, which is always special, to honor this group that has done such a good job for us. And then I want to congratulate Derek Brown, finalist for 6 national awards. He chose to come back, and he's had his best season. He's playing as good a football as anybody in the country. And, I know that Heisman is usually for offensive players and all that, but there can't be too many better players around the country than him. So real excited for him. But, I think you got to focus on the Iron Bowl right now, and the fact that we are battle tested. We played some of the best teams in the country, and so we've hung in there. We had chances to win, some of those. So I think that really helps us. And then, you look at the future. I mean, we've got some outstanding young guys. I know the focus has been on the seniors, which have done a super job, but we've got some young guys that can flat out play. So the future's real bright, real excited for the future, and we'll cross that bridge as far as the schedule goes, next year. Yeah, when you look back at close games, there's a fine line between winning and losing, and a lot of times it's either 1 or 2 plays, impact plays when the game's on the line that you have to make to win the game, and that's probably the thing that has stood out the most. We've been very close. We had opportunities. You look back, there's 1 or 2 things, and if you would have made those plays, we would have had a good chance to win, or we'd have won the game. So, when you're playing, it's the top teams, you got to make plays to win the game, and so that's really our goal for this one, and, that we'll need to do that.
We're back as we mow our way through the final hour. Larry is up next. Hello, Larry.
What's up, Finebaum?
We're doing great, Larry.
That's good, man. I'm so happy. I'm just happy as a duck farting in water. Hey, check this out, man. That thing last night, that's supposedly rankings, Utah moved up. They're going to always have somebody moved up ready to take Bama's spot. If Bama, if we do the L, I'm not going to say it, with Auburn, then we're done. Our season's done. What are we going to do? Go play in the some bowl game, Kraut Bowl against.
Well, probably be either
Oklahoma against
the
Oklahoma, who we will beat the snot out of that quarterback for Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we will. We know every move that boy gonna make before he makes it. But I'm just saying these rankings are. You got it right, Paul, when you said South Carolina was a bad loss for Georgia, but you don't see it on the rankings. They act like it never happened. Yeah, it's a bad loss. Bama should be in the 4th slot. Why should they not? Have you got a reason?
I really don't. I think it's a good argument. I mean, the only thing that they say is that Georgia beat Notre Dame, Georgia beat Auburn, which Alabama will do, and Georgia beat Florida.
Yeah, whoop-de-doo. So here's the point. That committee's going to keep kissing the Big Ten's ass every year, just like they did when they let them in. They got the snot beat out of them. A bunch of whiny, just like Jeff from Columbus, Ohio, Yankees, sniveling, high-pitched talking, know-nothing. That's Jeff from Chicago wanting to tell you how to do your show. He needs just mind his business. I guess he's where he wants to be now. Woo, look at us. We number 1. I can't wait they go down, boy. I can't wait. I just wish it was Bama playing them. We'd beat their britches off. We'd send them home with little red asses. That's all I'm going to say, Paul, other than happy Thanksgiving. Roll Tide.
Joe is up next in Houston. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Paul. And let me say before I get to talking, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Same to you.
Appreciate you. Watch you day in and day out. And appreciate your consistency and the information about college football.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak to you about my frustration with the Georgia A&M game. I'm watching a team that seems like they're getting better as the season goes on. They had a very hard season playing a lot of number 1 teams. I don't think some of those number 1 teams want to play them at this point in the season. And I know they started slow. And I know they ran into the line about 20 times into the same spot in the line. But even so, I think that game would be a toss-up if it wasn't for the bad calls that came along during the game. And these are bad calls. My wife and I walked around the block, and there's half a dozen housewives who saw the calls. And I'm just wondering, about these guys that get paid for a living. I found myself agreeing somewhat with Legend the other day.
Joe, I have ceased to defend the officiating in the SEC. I used to say that they mean well, but there have been too many cases this year where the calls have been outrageously bad. And what's even more disturbing to me is that I thought the conference was going to explain some of these calls. They made that announcement at the SEC Media Days, and I haven't heard them explain any of them. Have you?
No, I haven't. And I mean, even the announcers just kind of blow it off. I mean, a guy grabs a face mask and yanks a guy's head down a foot and then gets open for a touchdown pass, and they just kind of go on like it's no big deal. But, when they start calling holding, then the guys either stop doing that or they, or they start playing a different kind of football. I mean, these were flagrant, Paul. These guys, the guy's got his jersey pulled across the way, and another one where a guy they don't stop. They don't blow the whistle, and they wait for half a dozen other guys to show up, and then the ball pops out.
Joe, thank you. I understand your frustration. I really do. I don't know what I can do to help you deal with it, though. Rick is in Myrtle Beach. Hello, Rick.
Hey, Paul. Hey, listen, I want to a couple of things. First is how the SEC conference game, championship games, turned into a liability for the teams playing. This year, last year, and the year before, the number 4 team at the end of the regular season goes into that championship game like Auburn. They beat Georgia and Alabama. They go in ranked number 4 and lose, and then you get Alabama in there that didn't even play that day. They were sitting home on the couch. And you got last year, Georgia played a close game. They went in ranked number 4, lost a close game, and Notre Dame goes in. They were sitting home on the couch. And now this year, if Georgia wins or Georgia goes in there and loses, Alabama's probably going to slide in the back door again. And they were sitting home on the couch. So it looks to me like the SEC championships turn into a liability game.
Well, Rick, listen, Rick, what's the solution, though? Everyone else has conference games.
Well, my solution is making an 8-team playoff, and you've got the conference champion automatically included in those 8 teams, the big Power 5. And then you got 3 more for the at-larges. I mean, you look at every other sport, including every other division of college football, the conference champion gets in the playoffs.
No, listen, I agree with you, but I've heard the commissioner and I've heard other people defend it. It's a big moneymaker. It's a big television attraction. If you eliminated that, first of all, you'd have to eliminate that to have a legitimate 8-team playoff.
Well, like this year, if Georgia wins, and that's the whole West Coast is basically out of the playoffs. You lose half the audience there.
Listen, you make a really good point. I'm glad you called. Thank you very, very much. We are going to head to a break here at the bottom of the hour. We still have 30 minutes to go.
It is actually interesting that the focus just goes completely past Georgia Tech, not just because it's a rivalry game, not just because it's on the road, but because with Georgia's offensive troubles, if Georgia doesn't fix those offensive troubles, the game could be close for a while. But ultimately, Georgia Tech's 3-8, so people are looking to LSU. And, I sense some optimism just talking to people like fans and, maybe some fellow media members. I have a podcast with former Georgia All-American linebacker Rennie Curran, and he's pretty optimistic about Georgia's chances. And that's despite actually losing total yardage to Texas A&M on Saturday, and not the first time that Georgia's won despite being beat in total yardage, and not dominating an opponent. It just kind of comes down to matchups, and people think that they have an elite defense here and that they can hold LSU's elite offense in check. The conditions weren't great last Saturday night, but he still missed open receivers more than I've seen him ever miss somebody who's open. And Texas A&M's quarterback, Kellen Mond, didn't have as much trouble throwing the ball in similar conditions. The good news for Georgia, there will be no such elements in the SEC championship or any playoff game they would play after that. But it's not something that's been limited to rain-soaked games. It's something that they've got to figure out. And, Paul, if I were looking at Georgia, especially with this offense and Jake Fromm, just within the context of this 2019 season, just what they've done this year, if I didn't know anything about this team or Jake Fromm prior to this season, I would say they don't have a chance against LSU. If you beat LSU, you get in. It's the same situation they've been in, Paul, the last 2 years, 2017, 2018. They came in to the LSU or to the SEC championship with one loss, knowing they just get in and they win. Last year, they made the argument for getting in, even though they lost. I don't think that they'll be able to make that argument this time, especially if Alabama wins at Auburn. But it's pretty simple for them, and it's why the last 3 or 4 weeks, when the playoff rankings have come out and there's been all the debate over playoff scenarios, the reaction around here has been kind of muted because everyone kind of realized Georgia's situation was pretty straightforward.
Belk winning with style, and talk about winning with style. How about the Georgia against Georgia Tech? This is a really big rivalry. Last 9 meetings, pretty one-sided. And welcome back to the program. We are taking your phone calls at 855-242-7285. And Jack is in South Carolina. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Paul. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Listen, I don't understand the kerfuffle over Clemson's schedule. I mean, these schedules are made years in advance, right? So
They are, yes.
And there's no way of knowing that Florida State would take such a tumble, or Miami, or Virginia Tech's not that good this year. And you can't really hold it against Clemson because the competition is lacking. And they are, after all, beating a Power Five teams to have the same access to 4- and 5-star recruits and same facilities, and so they're beating the big boy teams, and they're beating the pants off of them. But they can't help it that they're just down this year.
Well, listen, they can't do anything about the conference schedule, just like Alabama can't. The only thing they can control is non-conference, and I will defend Clemson. They had a home and home with A&M, and they didn't have to do that. They could play South Carolina and say that's their game. So,
right. Well, they have Georgia scheduled in about 12 years on a home and home. So who knows where either program's going to be at that point. So,
really good point. I'm not criticizing Clemson's schedule. I'm just simply making a point when I bring this up that a lot of other teams would be successful with their schedule.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I mean, I don't see how they can be penalized. Like I said, they are beating these teams, and they're beating them really badly. So, they're doing all they can do. I just hope they have a small chance against LSU or Ohio State, because I know
listen, Jack, they're not going to be penalized. All Clemson has to do is win 2 more games, and they're in. Hey, thank you for the call. I do appreciate it. It's always great to hear from you, and let's talk to Matthew in St. Louis. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Paul. I was wondering, do you think Georgia's defense is good enough to beat LSU?
I do, Matthew. I think the Georgia defense is as good as we have. My question to you is, do you think Georgia's offense can score enough points to keep up with Joe Burrow and company?
I think so. I mean, I don't think Jake Fromm is doing that good, but I feel like they just should let DeAndre Swift just run that ball and score a couple and win.
Listen, I think Jake Fromm is I don't know what happened to Jake Fromm against A&M. Maybe the weather got to him, but I've seen him do it. I thought the final drive against Florida was unbelievable.
Yes, sir.
So what are you doing for Thanksgiving, Matthew?
We're going to Memphis to visit my aunt.
Well, that sounds like a great plan. Listen, you have a great Thanksgiving, and I hope you'll call us again.
Okay, thank you. Go Dogs, Paul.
Great to have you on. A 10-year-old from St. Louis who is a dog fan. Jeff is in Virginia. Hello, Jeff.
How you doing, Paul?
All good. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, Paul, man, I've really enjoyed some of your guests you've had this evening. That's Cecil Hurt from down in Tuscaloosa. I really enjoyed his objective analysis of the Iron Bowl down there and everything. And wanted to also mention Coach Orgeron out there at LSU. I'm a Georgia fan, but I have to admit I've really enjoyed Coach Orgeron and the work that they've done this year. It's hard to pull against that man. And you've had a lot of guests, Paul, that a few guests that have talked about the SEC championship game and everything. And Matthew, there you guessed a minute ago, wondering about it, and we're all wondering about it. Looking at the Georgia program this year, can't help but realize and feel that things certainly aren't where Coach Smart and his staff would like to be. They've had a difficult time putting all the pieces together and getting everybody where they're needed and working together and so forth and so on. But in looking at the SEC championship game, I think the thing, and it's no secret, everybody knows what Georgia's going to have to do to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. They're going to have to win the time of possession. They're going to have to win at least 2 of the 3 phases of the game. They're going to need to get off the field on third down. And the biggest thing is you get off the field on third down is they got to keep Joe Burrow over there on the sideline. If you want to keep if you want to beat LSU and Joe Burrow, keep his hind end over there on the bench. And with that, you're going to have some offensive balance. You know, they are going to have to come up with some passing game so that they can stretch that field and everything to get the balance that they need. But I think it's going to be a great opportunity and a great challenge for the University of Georgia. I also enjoyed your guest a few minutes ago from Myrtle Beach. I liked the points that he made about how they're ranking things this year and have been ranking them in the past. And I think there's a lot of support out there for 18 playoff, the Power Fives plus 3 at large, and maybe these guys can get it there. But just wanted to make a few comments there, Paul. But then I wanted to end my comments or close my thoughts on things with a little pet peeve that I've got.
Okay.
And I know this is probably something that's out of everybody's control, but man, I see you up there in New York hosting the SEC show, and it just doesn't seem right. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of advantages to you all, you know, hosting some of the shows or a lot of the shows up in New York as far as networking.
Well, Jeff, let me explain that, okay?
I'd love to hear your explanation. I've often wondered, Paul.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So a year ago, my bosses, which I work for ESPN, as you probably know, asked me if I could come up here every Wednesday and do the 2 morning shows, Get Up, First Take, Golick and Wingo, and various other hits from up here for the network, Sports Center, et cetera, Stephen A. Smith's radio show. So we did that, and I thought 1 day a week was really good. And now this year they asked me to do it 2 days, which I do what they asked me to do, and I've enjoyed coming up here. The difference is 1 day and 2 days are a big difference. There's a big deal. There's a big difference between 1 and 2 days, and I certainly understand where you are. We think it's an important. I say we. My bosses think it's an important thing to get the SEC and get what we do every day on all these other shows to help promote. I hate to use the word brand, but I will. We were not doing it in the dark of night. Everyone knew what we were doing. Everyone signed off on it, including the conference. And but I appreciate your comments. And we're only up here for a few more weeks, and then we come back south. Thanks for the call. More to come in the final few minutes on this Thanksgiving Eve.
Let me say this. There was a comment I made after the game, and I want to apologize if it came out wrong to Arkansas. I love them. I had a great time up there. I have some good friends up there. By no means that was to demean them. That was just the mood of our football team, and that we have bigger goals down the road. So if I said something wrong, I apologize to them, but I know those guys are some good guys up there. Really appreciate those guys. All right, on to Texas A&M. A good football team, well-coached football team. We got good players, and this is going to be a big challenge for our team. And we have to take the emotions out of last year, focus in on this year. We're just a different football team. We're playing them at home, but we're going to have to play a complete game to win this game. I like the way Mo played. I think that he did some really good things. The first play was the same play that Ole Miss ran against it. He made a tackle, which was a nice tackle, saved it from making a big play. Grant is full speed. I just talked to Jack. He's going to work out today. He's going to practice every day this week. I think the rest helped him. And I told him that after the game. I said, although those things happen. We got to look at the plays that we could have made. The plays we did, let's face it, we didn't play well on defense. I watched the film again this morning. There's a lot of things that we got to get better at starting the day. They're very challenging. They're very well coached.
And then just Kellen Mond as a quarterback over there. I don't know where he is as far as their expectations, but what do you see out of him as a quarterback that could be potentially dangerous?
He's dangerous. Last year he had a lights-out game against us, running the ball, throwing the ball, big receivers, great scheme. I think this is one of the better players we're going to see all year.
And secondly, with the implementation of so many spread offenses around the country, does it change the way you look at the running back position and the versatility that's now expected out of that position?
Clyde's perfect for it. The little running back, the scat back, especially the back that can catch the ball out of the backfield. The big bruising tailback, not to say that he can't play in this offense, but it just doesn't fit. I'm for it. I'm for it. As much as we can do for Joe, I'm for it. We don't do it inside the meeting room. With myself personally, I know in my heart he's the best player in the country. I think he ought to win it. I'm biased, but that's how I feel. It's going to be great for the university. It'll be great for Joe. He deserves it. And the best thing about Joe, he don't want to talk about it. He just wants to talk about the next game. So he's a very unselfish player, but very deserving of the award.
It is the night before Thanksgiving and all through the house. Let's get back to the calls. And Jimmy is up next in Chicago.
Hey, Paul. I haven't paid that much attention or, put a lot of stock into the college football playoff ratings the first 2 or 3 weeks. But last night it did kind of get my attention that Georgia stayed at number 4. But, of course, at the end of the day, it isn't going to matter. If Georgia beats LSU, they're going to be in, And Alabama has to beat Auburn. We all know that. But I did kind of find it interesting because Georgia's kind of been hanging on. That A&M game was really strange to me because for 3 quarters, A&M was just absolutely awful. But yet they were able kind of to stay within range. And then when they finally scored a touchdown in the 4th quarter, then it got really interesting. And all of a sudden, Georgia's trying to hang on for dear life. And, you look at some common opponents, that type of thing, and, Alabama just had their way with A&M in College Station pretty much just, most of the ball game. And I just got a couple of questions about that Georgia defense. They went up 21-0 on Auburn, I think with 13 minutes left in the game, and almost blew a 3-touchdown lead in a 10-minute span. And had Nix not over a throw behind the running back on that 4th down play, man, that game could have very well gone into overtime. And a couple of A&M fans have called in, and they were right. That was a horrendous no call on the pass interference on A&M's final drive there. But there's just something about Georgia to me that's missing. And my gut feeling is not like I'm sure a lot of their fans is that they got a great shot against LSU. I just don't know that LSU offense. I mean, they just seem like they just have that it factor. What's your thinking on that, Paul?
Yeah, listen, everybody talks about Georgia's great wins, and I'm not really that sold on the Notre Dame game. I mean, they had to hold on there too, as you remember. So, what's their best win? Is it Florida? Is it Auburn? Or is it Notre Dame? Beyond that, their resume to me has been marred by that South Carolina loss, which virtually nobody wants to talk about. You mentioned A&M. Alabama was up by 30 against South Carolina until the final minute or the final couple of seconds. Georgia lost at home. There's some pretty interesting comparisons, Jimmy.
Yeah, and you look at that Florida win. What was the difference in the game? A pass that was obviously incomplete, and replay reviewed it, and they called it a catch, and nobody thought it was a catch, and they end up going down and scoring. And, you don't like to mention officiating or anything like that, but this year in the SEC, You just can't avoid it. And one thing, even on your show, which I was surprised following the LSU game, I mean, it was just such a dynamic game, Alabama-LSU. Nobody really talked about the officiating in that game. And it was absolutely brutal. I mean, you get Waddle returns a punt 80 yards for a touchdown, yet he almost got his the helmet jerked off by a face mask. And then the Moss catch at the 1 yard line where Gene Steratore, who worked the Super Bowl 2 years ago, is saying, hey, once this guy steps out of bounds and he's the first guy to touch it again, he's an ineligible receiver. And then they go look at it for 5 minutes and they confirm it. And Steratore goes, I may have to delve back into the rule book again. And I think Gene Steratore knows the rules. And the thing that really got me, though, was in the second half. After about the 15th time an LSU defender faked an injury and then ended up trotting off the field, you'd think after about the 10th time they might consider maybe calling a delay a game or sportsmanlike conduct or something. But it's just been bad all year, and I just hope it's not a factor this weekend.
Jimmy, thank you very much. Jay is in Florida as we begin to wind things down on a Wednesday night. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Paul, how are you tonight, bud?
I am doing great. Thank you.
I know you are, and I won't take any more time, but I called to voice my support to you and thanks in light of that question earlier and your explanation about being up in New York. I'm an Auburn grad. I'm a Florida native from the interior of Florida, which is the southern part of the state, but now living on the coastline, which is the Yankee part of the state. And I voice my support for you taking our southern lifestyle up there to New York. Get up there and preach it all you can. And I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah,
War
I mean,
Eagle and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. I think people don't understand that by being on all these other shows that are obviously nationally televised and seen by a lot of people, I do think it's good for the SEC. But thanks for checking in. Jim is in Ohio. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Paul. Well, I'm calling you tonight on this committee stuff. It's been college, you've been 150 years now. Have you ever heard of a number one team winning by 49, 50 points and dropping in the standings? I just don't understand how the committee can do that.
I don't think it's ever happened before. But again, you're talking about beating the worst team in the SEC versus Ohio State beating a top 10 team. So I still think it could change again because Ohio State will play Michigan, which is a good team, not a great team. They may not have a superior opponent in the Big Ten game. And don't forget, LSU has A&M, which is a good team, and then they play the number 4 team in the country. So in some ways, it does favor LSU the rest of the way.
But let me throw something at you. What if Michigan beats Ohio State, then Ohio State goes to the Big Ten championship and wins the Big Ten championship, then Alabama's gone.
Yeah, Alabama is not someone that needs a lot of chaos right now. I mean, Georgia could beat LSU and Michigan could beat Ohio State. Then Ohio State turns around and then you could be looking at a decision between Ohio State and LSU. How would you determine that one? I mean, that's a really fascinating conversation. Anyway, appreciate the call. I want to say it again on behalf of everyone who works on this program behind the scenes and obviously those of us up front. We thank you all for making this an incredibly joyous holiday season. We hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you Friday from Auburn. Happy Thanksgiving, a day early, but nevertheless, everyone's celebrating. We say hello to you. Happy Wednesday. Great to be with you up here on the East Coast. Everybody seems to be in a festive mood, and I am guaranteeing that our audience will be no different.
You know, the more the committee talks, the more confusing it gets because they say one thing and then they do another.
They want us to talk about this, and we are talking about it.
They could just mailed in the results.
After listening to all this nonsense the last couple of days,
my vomit bucket is about full.
Clemson started off at the number 5 position, Greg, and I think that was indicative of their weak schedule. I am contractually obligated to agree with everything Nick Saban says. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
I'm just visiting my grandparents right now.
I can't tell you how many people I've seen who say, oh, Ohio State's not good because they play in the Big Ten. I just don't know how you can rationally say that. And I can't tell you how many people who say that. You ever come across those people?
Yes. I mean, you better believe it.
I'm assuming you agree with Ohio State being number 1, right?
I do agree, yes. I mean, I can name you right now five schools in the SEC that would be undefeated with Clemson's schedule. So I think that's a very unfair conversation to have. I wish they would just choose the 4 best teams in the country, but they don't do that. The president of the university has nothing to do with who plays and who doesn't, and he shouldn't. He runs the university. As far as to his career, I don't think it's over. The doctors are pretty upbeat. But thanks anyway for calling.
Don't you think they start this college football playoff ranking just a little bit too early? The only one that counts is the last one.
And the problem is a lot of people that are doing the conversation have no idea what they're talking about.
We beat Georgia.
I don't care what you did. I mean, you give me a compelling reason why outside of that one game, what has South Carolina done this year to beat an elite team?
On a given day, anybody can lose.
I mean, listen. I'm not going to argue with you about a team that's 4-7. I mean, if you think South Carolina's going to win the game, why don't you tell me why?